not about me, by the way, and watching my doc. I don't get any money for people watching it. If we showed people a different perspective, the voice of all the people who were opposing or who had concerns, I don't believe the figure would be so high. And we find that when I talk to people, or when people have watched the documentary.
Good morning, I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We're live in studio. What's that?
You sound good.
Yeah, that's okay level?
Yep.
Right on. Okay, thanks, brother.
It's either me that needs to change or it's society. I guess that comes through here really strongly. I understand that people desperately want control at a time when it's terrifying. Maybe they're in pain, maybe they're worried about pain. However, I'm thinking we don't all, autonomy has its limits. Personal freedom has its limits if we are part of a society, and we need to think about the protection of all other people.
Finally, I just want to take you back to that young girl, the young Liz Carr, who was in despair, aged 12, 13, and you talk about it in your documentary because your mum kept journals, and she said that there were times when, she, as your mum, saw and heard you say that you wanted to die. Is that a fundamental part of your thinking?
And there was a lot more. And I knew that it was desperate at times then, but I didn't realise that I had actually said the words that I wanted to die. And that really frightens me. How many people out there feel so desperate, but they're not desperate particularly because of their medical conditions. It's like, you're desperate because you're not given opportunities. It has to be part of what has driven me, definitely. And I think sometimes we need to say no, not give people support. I want everyone to have a good death. I just don't want the ability to give some people what they want to harm others.
Liz Carr, we have to end there, but thank you very much for joining me on Hard Talk.
Thank you so much.
That was Hard Talk. I'm Saroja Coelho. You're listening to CBC Radio 1. Have a great day.
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello there, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We're live downtown in Winnipeg in our CBC studios on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube. Well, woo! What a lot of snow out there, right? It's slushy, it's icy. You're going to be carving lanes. If you're in the city of Winnipeg, please watch for crews that are already out trying to keep up on what's going to continue falling today. Outside of the city of Winnipeg, we have highways closed, McCreary to Grandview, Highway 5, Highway 10, portions of 20, 68, 50. You get the picture right through that Riding Mountain area, through Dauphin. Those are the big challenge areas extending through the Narrows. So all over Manitoba, snowy start to Friday, or I guess I should say a snowy continuation from last night. So hang on tight, folks. Thanks for joining us. Morning show is on until 8:37 a.m. And good morning to Abby Adeyemi, who's behind the controls of the show in studio control room, as well in our control room, Kevin Nipatebo, who is our YouTube producer. Good morning to you, Kevin. And good morning to Chloe Friesen, who's directing the program. And we'll be covering the commute this morning, directing the show, and also trying to keep up with school closures should they come in. And I suspect we might hear of some. All right, let's go to other things that we will be keeping up to date with, including, of course, the news. Matt Humphreys in for Heather Wells.
Good morning. Last night saw a sacred fire for Ashlee Shingoose. Dozens of people sang and drummed and shared prayers. Previously known as Mushkode Bishake Ikwe Iban, she was the first victim of a Winnipeg serial killer, and her true identity was confirmed earlier this week. Her father spoke at the vigil last night. We'll hear from him at the bottom of the hour, along with all the other news.
All right. Thanks very much, Matt.
Back soon.
Let's get into what else is coming up in the program today, beyond staying on top of the weather. It's Juno weekend coming up, so we're going to talk about the Manitoba nominees. We're going to hear a portion of an interview we did with Sebastian Gaskin, as well as he was announced as a nominee, so that's all coming up on the show. We have a really quirky but very interesting medical column today. Dr. Raj Bhardwaj, who knew, is a space nerd, so he's even given talks outside of his profession on what happens to the body when astronauts are in space, so he was all over it when those astronauts came back last week after being up there 9 months. So we're going to hear from him today. And then we will hear more about iPolitics, from iPolitics rather, the editor-in-chief there, about Trump's auto tariffs and what that looks like this morning as we inch closer to April 2nd. Right now, though, it's time for World Report on CBC.
On Q.
I'm Garvey Bailey in for Tom Power. When Britt Lauer was getting ready to play Helly R on the hit series Severance, she says she studied a lot of caged animals to prepare.
I am a person. You are not.
Britt will tell you more about her life on Severance and about her Canadian film Darkest Miriam.
Q. This morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm John Northcott.
Our response to these tariffs is to fight, to protect, and to build. Vive le Canada, we will fight.
Liberal leader Mark Carney back on the campaign trail as a candidate last night in Montreal, but not for long. There's more work to be done in his role as Prime Minister. Carney says he will speak to U.S. President Donald Trump soon about the new U.S. tariffs now threatening Canada's auto industry. And later today, he'll be meeting with the country's premiers as well as the U.S.-Canada Advisory Council.
In the coming weeks, months, and years, we need to fundamentally reimagine our economy. It will take hard work.
But the campaign trail is a priority, too, for all those vying to become the next Prime Minister. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is trying to change the narrative around his campaign. Today, he's in BC on a promise to impose mandatory life sentences for drug smuggling, gun smuggling, human trafficking, and fentanyl. The Conservatives have just seen a series of tough polls, and they're getting a grave warning from Ontario Premier Doug Ford's campaign manager. Kate McKenna has the latest.
It is great to be here at Apollo.
Pierre Poilievre is on day 2 of a West Coast swing. He's traveling to Nanaimo, campaigning to turn an orange seat blue. 3 months ago, it looked like Poilievre was poised to make big gains in British Columbia. Now he's trailing in national polls, but he says it's not over till it's over.
We'll wait for Canadians to make the choice on Election Day.
But some big-name Conservatives are calling for a major pivot.
The Conservatives were on track to win a massive majority government, and if election were held today, it would be a Liberal majority government.
Doug Ford's campaign manager, Keewatinowi, has some tough love for his federal cousins.
I think the Conservatives are in a lot of trouble right now, which is one of the bigger political surprises that I've seen in the last number of decades of working in this business.
Tonight says Poilievre sounds too much like Donald Trump, and it's turning people off.
I think, less name calling and sloganeering and talking about one's big, beautiful, bring it home tax cut. It all sounds a little too Trumpy for a lot of the voters.
There are 43 ridings in BC. Right now, they're almost evenly split between Conservative, Liberals, and the NDP. It's a battleground in a campaign that's already been unpredictable. Kate McKenna, CBC News, on a ferry to Nanaimo.
And a quick clarification there. The Conservative leader is proposing mandatory life sentences for gun smuggling, human trafficking, and fentanyl trafficking. Meanwhile, Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet is expected to campaign around the Montreal area today. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is back in Toronto. He'll be making an announcement in Jack Layton's former Toronto Danforth riding later today. And the Green Party co-leaders Elizabeth May and Jonathan Pedneau are in Nanaimo. A powerful 7.7 magnitude earthquake has rocked parts of Myanmar and Thailand. An ambulance races through the streets of Bangkok just after the quake hit. Thailand's defense minister says at least 3 people are dead, 90 missing at a construction site. Bangkok has declared a state of emergency. The quake's epicenter is in Myanmar. Damage is being reported in the cities of Yangon, Mandalay, and the capital Naypyidaw. In other areas, roads buckled and a bridge collapsed. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and his wife could get a frosty reception today in Greenland. They're part of a delegation visiting a U.S. military base there. President Donald Trump has repeatedly suggested annexing the semi-autonomous Danish territory, and that has prompted a growing number of Danes to boycott U.S. products. Briar Stewart has the story.
I began to feel a need to do something because...
In the days following Donald Trump's inauguration, Bo Albertus, a high school principal in Denmark, tried to cut American products out of his life. He canceled Netflix and 4 other streaming services. He stopped buying California wine and his favorite American barbecue sauce. A A small, simple way, he says, to protest the messages coming from Trump.
When he went out and said things about Greenland, that he wanted that to be American, that was just too much for me.
He helped start a Facebook group that has now swelled to 90,000 members, mostly Danes who swap advice about how to shop local and avoid products from the USA. Similar groups have popped up across Europe.
I don't think it'll make a big difference for actual sales, but it's a way for people also to talk about these things.
Ole Veva is a professor at the University of Copenhagen and says the boycott campaign is tapping into the current mood in Denmark, where Trump's determination to take over Greenland has shaken the population.
Threats from the US, from what everyone assumed was our most important allies. Are we talking a real military takeover of some kind? I mean, there's no way of ruling out anything anymore.
Veva says in recent days, Danish politicians have started to take a stronger stand against the Trump administration. The Danish Prime Minister called the trip to Greenland unacceptable pressure, while others have been calling for Denmark to stop buying U.S. weapons. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
King Charles is back at home after being treated briefly in hospital for side effects from his cancer treatment. But events he had planned for today are still cancelled. Robert Hardman has authored several books on the royal family. He tells the BBC the 76-year-old king is still keeping up a very busy schedule.
Just this month, he met Zelensky. He's still meeting the Prime Minister as usual. He's had 2 Canadian Prime Ministers this month alone.
The king is expected to resume his normal schedule soon with a state visit to Italy next month. Charles was diagnosed with cancer in February 2024. Canada's largest retailer is expanding a program that uses body cameras to deter theft. Loblaw's employees started wearing cameras at stores in Alberta and Saskatchewan late last year. It's now being expanded to BC, Manitoba, and 38 stores across Ontario. Philip Lishanuk reports.
Why not? I mean, there seems to be cameras everywhere anyway.
Leaving an East End Toronto store, Colin Andrews says he's all for body cameras if it prevents theft.
They're just going to pass it to me. They're going to say, well, we're losing money. We got to make sure our shareholders are making their money, and we'll just raise prices.
His wife, Jennifer, agrees, but has privacy concerns.
What they're going to be doing with the images kind of at the end of the day.
Ontario's former Privacy Commissioner, Dr. Anne Keewatinowi, agrees. She says Loblaws must be transparent.
If nothing transpires, we will delete all of the information captured on our body cams that day.
And she says shoppers must be informed they're in use.
You must have signs in the store alerting them to this fact. They may just choose to leave. They may not want to have their facial image captured.
It's the latest anti-theft technology to be piloted by Loblaws. Last year it was receipt scanners and controlled exits.
This may be an issue that's unique to Loblaws.
Daniel Chai is a retail expert at Toronto Metropolitan University. He says other large chains are not testing body cameras.
People see Loblaws as, in some lights, enemy number one when it comes to high grocery prices.
And he says it may be because Loblaws chains dominate the marketplace. Philip Lishanuk, CBC News, Toronto.
The Juno Awards this weekend are breaking new ground. For the first time, the ceremony will honor South Asian artists with their own dedicated category. This milestone comes amid a broader explosion in South Asian Canadian artists in the music scene. CBC's Eli Glasner has more from Vancouver.
Growing up, Juno nominee Jonita Gandhi knew she wanted to make music, but as a young girl, she just wanted to fit in.
When I was young, I was kind of just trying to assimilate into the culture here, right, in Toronto, ignoring the fact that, my mom was packing rotis for my lunch that day.
But when she began singing in Bollywood films, she connected with her culture and a growing fan base.
That dream is kind of coming true now, and I'm able to kind of attract both Indian audiences and global audiences.
Gandhi is part of a growing wave of South Asian musicians based in Canada. Vancouver's very own Karan Aujla is one of the biggest Punjabi rappers in the world and one of multiple South Asian nominees competing at this year's Junos. No surprise, there's a new category dedicated to South Asian recordings, a sign of a shift for Surrey, BC Punjabi musician Chani Nata.
So to see our own people, our own language on those stages finally, it really means a lot.
because I wish we had that growing up, and now I feel like the generations after us are going to see that.
While South Asian musicians welcome the recognition, they say more support for artists will help ensure this sound is here to stay. Eli Glasser, CBC News, Vancouver.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. If you're enjoying the World Report podcast, please tell a friend or rate and review us. It helps to spread the word. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News. CBC News.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa, and this is Information Radio. We're live in our CBC studios on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube. Thanks for joining us. Well, what a lot of snow we got yesterday across Manitoba. That's going to continue. In Winnipeg, driving is tricky. We have some highways closed up through Riding Mountain, and we're keeping an eye on school divisions as well. So a challenging day, but spring break's next week, so maybe you'll end up with an extra long lead into spring break. We were just hearing about the Juno Awards. Of course, we have a handful of nominees from here in Manitoba, and this hour we're going to hear more about them. We're going to hear more about also what's at stake at the Junos on Sunday and who's expected to be taking home the hardware. So stay tuned for that. Also, we're going to hear from Manitoba's provincial health minister, who says tensions with our southern neighbors could encourage more U.S. healthcare workers to come to Manitoba. Already some have arrived. We'll hear about that in a moment. Right now, let's go to Matt Humphrey. He is live in our news center today with our headlines.
Good morning. People shared stories and prayers last night at a sacred fire for Ashlee Shingoose, the first victim of a Winnipeg serial killer. Her true identity was confirmed earlier this week. She had been known as Mashkode Bishike Ikwe Iban. Last night at the vigil, one of the elders who gave her that name invited her family to continue using it, saying she could walk with it in the spirit world for as long as she needed. We'll hear from her father at the bottom of the hour. And a Winnipeg journalist has lost his court battle and now must hand over an interview he did to city police. The judge in the case says the tape of the interview is relevant to an ongoing police investigation. At 6:30, we'll hear why the journalist's lawyer has concerns now for press freedom.
All right, thanks, Matt.
Back soon.
So that's Matt Humphrey filling in for Heather today live in our news center. Let's get into what the morning drive, or maybe I should say the morning slide, is going to be like. Abby, I don't know about you. Abby Adiyemi coming in with the weather here. But my drive in, when I got to Portage Ave, I thought I was okay in a lane, and I drive like an SUV. It's got all-wheel drive. But even still, I was just sort of sliding around a little bit and needing to slow down, and it's going to be very challenging out there. And there's a lot of snow that fell both inside the city and in the rural areas.
Yeah, most of the conditions I drove on my way in this morning felt like, frozen kind of snow, and then changing lanes felt kind of hard because I was like, oh, no. But that we still have that snowfall in effect for parts of southern Manitoba with about 15 centimeters expected. This is like in total, okay? So travel, but for Winnipeg, we're looking at additional 2 to 4 centimeters coming our way, plus what we had yesterday. Right now, Winnipeg -4 for the rest of the day. The snow is going to continue. Some breezy conditions will then warm up to around -1. It will feel colder a bit with a wind chill, and then a good chance of snow still continues into the evening and overnight. That's when it gets to ease. So all through the day, Marcy, we will be seeing snow, not just for Winnipeg, but most parts of southern Manitoba today.
All right, thanks very much, Abby. Yeah, I was walking in the city, and I have sort of high top runners on, and the snow was almost at the top of the runners, kind of peeking through this morning. But I got some photos from listeners overnight. So Peter Harvey regularly listens to the show. Good morning, Peter. He's out in Western Manitoba around Strathmillan. I hope I'm remembering that exactly correctly. But he was sending already early in the day yesterday photos, or in the afternoon rather, photos of the snow accumulating, much more than what we're seeing in Winnipeg. All right, so we do have challenges, speaking of which, out on the highways in that area in Westman. And Chloe Friesen is here to talk about our commute.
Hello. Yes, Marcy and I actually have the same boots, and I got a booter this morning.
Oh, it went right over the top.
Right over the top. So that was a nice way to start the day. Let's turn to highways. Some highway closures that folks need to know about. Highway 5, McCreary to Grandview is closed. Highway 10 from the south gates of Riding Mountain National Park to Highway 19. Highway 20 from Dauphin to the north junction of Highway 269, Highway 68 from Highway 5 to the Narrows, Highway 50 from Highway Silver Ridge to McCreary, Highway 278 from Highway 50 to Highway 68, Highway 276 from St. Rose de Lac to Highway 481, along with Highway 362. That is what we know so far, but I will continue bringing you updates. Also, before you leave, if you are traveling on Manitoba highways, check Manitoba 511 just to make sure about those conditions. Here in Winnipeg, we're looking at northbound Century approaching Silver. There is a collision with emergency crews on scene blocking your northbound curb and middle lanes. Keep left to pass. And speaking of the commute and snow, we have our first school closure. All schools are closed in Lord Selkirk School Division. That's Lord Selkirk School Division. All schools are closed. No buses are running, and staff are not expected to report to their place of work. So that's due to weather and road conditions, and we will continue bringing you updates about all of those things. Stay tuned throughout the show. If you do see something out there on the roads or the highways, call us 204-788-3093.
Well, as I mentioned, the province says it's making progress when it comes to recruiting more nurses and doctors from south of the border, with the ongoing tension between Canada and the States playing a supporting role. Manitoba's health minister says some U.S. healthcare workers are considering working in our province. Health Minister Uzoma Oseguera says they've recruited already 3 new nurses so far.
What I can tell you is that our Retention and Recruitment Office, the RRO, has been working very, very hard to make sure that folks who do not live in Manitoba, whether they're somewhere else in Canada, internationally, but certainly in the United States, know how they can make it in Manitoba. So we've made a number of efforts, including standing up a website called makeitinmanitoba.ca, to make sure that people have an easy place to get all the information they need to know how they can join our healthcare team. The Retention and Recruitment Office is actively reaching out across the United States to make sure that American healthcare workers know how they can join our healthcare team here in Manitoba. And we've got some really great incentives in place, including a $5,000 relocation fund for nurses who want to relocate to Manitoba. And I'm really thrilled to say that we've already successfully recruited 3 nurses from the United States to join our healthcare team here in Manitoba. And we're actively engaging with just over a dozen doctors who are looking to relocate to Manitoba as a result of these efforts. That's a new initiative from the Retention and Recruitment Office. It's a dedicated resource for U.S.-based nurses who would like to relocate to Manitoba and join the front lines of our healthcare system. And our province, we want for everybody to know, whether you live in Canada, the United States, or elsewhere, that Manitoba is a place for you. We value a diverse workforce. We want as many people as possible to know they'll be safe to practice to their full scope in our province, and that they're going to be able to work in a province where their government has their back. And so we're going to continue these efforts, make sure that if you live in the United States and you're a healthcare worker, that you know Manitoba would welcome you, and we're going to make the process and that pathway to practice as easy as possible. Well, we know, and we see it, I think, every single day, that there are real challenges that healthcare workers in the United States are facing, whether it's not being supported and being able to provide the quality care to all of the citizens that they serve, whether it's folks who have varying identities who no longer feel safe practicing healthcare in their communities or their states. And, you know, as a government, we recognize that, again, having a diverse workforce is a strength. And we want Manitoba to be home to all those who want to make it home and be a part of our healthcare system. We've been very clear that we respect healthcare workers, we respect the healthcare workforce, and we want them to have a good work-life balance and to know that their government has their backs. And that message is cutting through, not just in Manitoba, not just in Canada, but that message is cutting through right to the United States. And we want to make sure we can respond to the folks who are reaching out saying they want to join our healthcare team and make it easy for them to do so. We want as many folks as possible to feel excited about joining our healthcare system here in Manitoba. Our government, and I'll just give you a little example, if that's okay, in terms of how we invest as a government to strengthening healthcare versus the previous PC government. So we know the previous PC government spent millions of dollars on the Philippine recruitment efforts, right? I think $2.3 or $3 million, something like that. And when I came into the role of Minister of Health, they had recruited one healthcare worker. Our retention and recruitment office and the efforts of our government have successfully seen nearly 150 healthcare workers join the front lines by doing the work of fixing that Philippine recruitment program and making it make more sense, making it work for Manitobans. We are making real investments in supporting the front lines, and we're seeing that pay off by successfully recruiting and retaining 1,255 healthcare workers, and actually well more than that number, which I'll be happy to share in the coming days. And so we know there's more work to do. Certainly we recognize that our work is not done.
So that's Manitoba's Health Minister Uzoma Asaguera. The Manitoba Nurses Union says when it comes to recruitment, it wants to see the province focus on retention over recruiting to help keep nurses here in Manitoba. Time right now is 6:20 on the nose, and we are under the snowfall warning. Still continues for the city of Winnipeg. 2 to 4 more centimeters expected. It's really icy out there and a lot of snow down. Ice pellets -4 is our current condition. Brandon, your winds are north at 67 k's, so it's going to be blowing around. Visibility could become a problem, and we have light snow and drifting snow right now in the Brandon area. It's -7 currently temperature-wise. Well, you probably heard on World Report that the Junos are up on Sunday. We have 8 groups nominated with ties to Manitoba, or those that live here now still. So we'll talk about that and their chances and others in a moment. But we can't have a Juno interview without first hearing music. Here's Shawn Mendes, one of the most nominated artists.
Opened up my journal to a page. Everything that hurts me still the same. Feels like there's nothing new for me to say. Why? Sweating through the sheets, shaking in bed. Visions of her naked in my head. But I went off and chose myself instead. Why? Ease my mind. I don't know why. I don't know why. I stepped off the stage with nothing left. All the lights were fucking with my head. But here I am singing songs again. Why? Ease my mind. I don't know why.
Shawn Mendes. I love that song. Why? We're going to hear more of it, I'm sure, this weekend. He's got 4 total Juno nominations on Sunday. The Juno stream on CBC Gem at 7 o'clock. Michael Bublé hosting from Vancouver. And let's name our Manitoba artists, shall we? So you know who to cheer for from our province. So they are Lorena McKinnon, right? And later she's being nominated in May into the Hall of Fame in this country for music. Also, Boy Golden, Jocelyn Gould, James Ennis, won so many Junos. Big Dave McLean, The Secret Beach, Sebastian Gaskin, who we'll hear from in a conversation in the second hour of the show, and Jordan St. Cyr. So lots of talent here in Manitoba. Performances on Sunday, if you're going to watch, or maybe you're lucky enough to be going. Sum 41, Josh Ross, and Baby No Money, and more. Kelsey Adams is here to talk more about the Junos. She is an associate producer at CBC Music. Good morning.
Good morning.
So what do you think people can expect from Michael Bublé?
Yeah, so this will be Michael's 3rd time hosting, so he's basically a professional now. And he previously hosted and performed at the 2013 and 2018 Junos. And it'll be his 2nd time hosting in Vancouver. He grew up in Burnaby, so it's almost like a hometown show for him. He's always got a really fun, cheeky sense of humor. And in the past, he's done skits with Nelly Furtado, Gerard Butler, and Russell Peters. So we're hoping he really amps that up this year. And he's also going to be performing a special medley of some of his hits. And Michael's not nominated this year for any Junos, but he is a 15-time Juno winner.
Wow, hey. Who are some of the most nominated artists? Obviously, we just heard about Shawn Mendes, but who else is on that list this year?
Yeah, so Calgary's Tate McRae and Waterdown, Ontario's Josh Ross. I always mess up his name. Josh Ross are going head-to-head for 4 categories. They're up for Single of the Year, Album of the Year, Artist of the Year and TikTok Juno Fan Choice. And then Tate's also nabbed herself a nomination for Pop Album of the Year. And Josh is also up for Country Album of the Year for his debut release, Complicated. So that rounds both of those artists up to 5 noms each. And like you mentioned, right behind them, Shawn Mendes with 4. The Weeknd is also up for 4 awards. And he, if he wins all of those 4 awards, will beat Anne Murray's record of most Juno wins ever. Murray has held that record since 1993. She has 25 Junos.
Wow, that's saying something for the weekend. Who's going to perform? I love watching the Junos because I find that the performances are always, the artists know it's a moment. They know that there's all eyes on their music. And also there's just this freedom of celebration of music because everyone in the room loves music. So it's one of my favorite things. So what are you looking forward to on Sunday about who's going to be on stage?
I'm really excited for Sum 41. They're doing a very special performance. Snotty Nose Rez Kids, Nemesis, Aquila, Tia Wood, Peach Pit. There's also, like I mentioned, that special medley with Michael Bublé. He's being joined by Alyssa P, Maestro Fresh West, Roxanne Bruno, and Janita Gandhi. And also, not on the Sunday, but on the Saturday, Sebastian Gaskin is performing at the Opening Night Awards. And your listeners can totally check out that performance on cbcmusic.ca.
In terms of when you think about, we talk about the Junos on Sunday, but there's been so much going leading up to it as well. Aside from people might be leaning into sort of the new artists or the ones that have been doing covers for CBC of, other Canadian artists. There's so much happening. What are some, outside of the big names, who else do you think we should watch for the Junos on Sunday, especially for those that might not follow the music scene in this country?
Yeah, definitely. There's, every year there's an award called Breakthrough Artist or Breakout Artist. And there's artists like Tia Wood, who is having an incredible first year. She previously performed with her family's sort of powwow drum group, Northern Cree, and they've won Junos in the past. But she launched her solo career in 2023 and has just released her debut EP. There's Nemesis, who's based in Toronto, and she's just had a juggernaut year. She got dropped from her label and then went independent and released an album that's been critically acclaimed, and she's just having an incredible year. There's Ecstasy, very, very cool sort of rocker from Vancouver. There's so many people sort of just bubbling up and making names for themselves.
Thanks for running us through and getting us excited about this, giving us a bit of a preview, Kelsey. Appreciate having you on live this morning. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
That's Kelsey Adams. She's an associate producer with CBC Music. You can catch the Juno Awards at 7 Winnipeg time on CBC Television. It streams across Canada. cbcmusic.ca/Junos on Sunday as well. So that is the March 30th, in case you're circling it on your calendar. Shawn Mendes is going to take us to the news with more Why. Shawn Mendes, we'll see if he wins for Single of the Year on Sunday. He's nominated for the Juno Awards. And Sebastian Gaskin, we're going to hear from him. He's one of our local noms from Manitoba. That's in the second hour of Information Radio. I'm Marcy Marcusa. You're listening to Information Radio, the morning show. Thanks for joining us this snowy Friday morning. We already know that if you go to school in the Lord Selkirk School Division, then your spring break is starting early because Lord Selkirk School Division has closed everything today. No buses, staff not expected to report. It is really challenging out there. We have a number of highway closures. Check 511 before you're heading out, especially through the Riding Mountain area this morning as that snowfall warning continues for most of southern and central Manitoba. And in Winnipeg, we're expecting a further 2 to 4 centimeters of snow. Matt's going to talk more about that. So are Chloe and Abby coming up in the next block here. So stay with us and take it easy if you're up early. Well, let's talk about what's coming up in business news. U.S. President Donald Trump is threatening larger tariffs if Canada and the European work together. We're going to hear more about the context of that right after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. At 6:30, we're at -4 with a continuing snowfall warning in downtown Winnipeg, but we are expecting the snow to taper off over the next few hours. Good morning, I'm Matt Humphrey. We begin with drumming, singing, and prayers. A sacred fire was lit last night at the Mamawe Chiita Center to remember Ashlee Shingoose. Community, family, and friends gathered. Shingoose's identity was confirmed on Wednesday. She had been known as Mashkode Bishake Ikwe Iban, or Buffalo Woman, and was the first victim of Winnipeg serial killer Jeremy Skibitsky. Sandra Delarond, an advocate for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, says the community has mixed feelings right now.
Well, I think there's a sense of muted gratitude, that the family has been able to identify and reclaim their daughter. But there's also a sense of frustration that it took so long.
Premier Wabkanu also spoke at the vigil last night, and he reiterated his vow to search the Brady Road landfill for Shingoose's remains. A City TV reporter must hand over an unedited interview he did to Winnipeg police. A Court of King's Bench judge has ruled against Morgan Majeski. He had sought to stop police from accessing his interview with the father of a man charged in a mass shooting. Majeski's lawyer, Ian McKinnon, says the decision could make sources afraid to speak to journalists.
That's the really concerning part, the whole chilling effect that this could also have on people maybe not talking to journalists as much if they know that everything they say to a journalist could just end up going to the police.
Majeski's employer, Rogers Media, successfully fought off the order twice. The journalist paid for this latest challenge himself. Turning now to Montreal.
Our response to these tariffs is to fight, to protect, and to build. Vive le Canada. We will fight.
That is Liberal leader Mark Carney back again on the campaign trail last night as a candidate. But today he's working primarily as Prime Minister, holding talks with members of his Canada-US cabinet and meeting with the premiers about Canada's economic future.
In the coming weeks, months, and years, we need to fundamentally reimagine our economy. It will take hard work.
And at some point, Carney will be speaking with U.S. President Donald Trump today. It's not clear at this time when that will be. As for the other party leaders, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is in Nanaimo in British Columbia, as are the Green Party co-leaders Elizabeth May and Jonathan Pedneau. Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet is in the Montreal area, and NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is back in Toronto today. In international news, Bangkok police say a high-rise building under construction collapsed when a 7.7 magnitude earthquake hit the Thai capital, and possible casualties are not yet known. There are reports at least 43 workers are trapped. 2 massive earthquakes rocked Southeast Asia, causing buildings in Bangkok to sway, prompting evacuations across the city as well as in neighboring Myanmar. And finally, a new biking and walking path will soon connect Morden and Winkler in southern Manitoba. The CBC's Rosanna Hempel was there last week as part of our Communities in Focus initiative. She brings us more on how the communities there work together to make this dream a reality.
About 10 kilometers of highway connects the cities of Morden and Winkler. The busy road stretches across the rural municipality of Stanley. In a few months, the Twin Cities will be connected by a new biking and walking trail. James Friesen chairs the Stanley Community Pathway Committee. He says people have been talking about linking the Twin Cities this way for decades.
The pathway to us really signified sort of a physical bond between two communities that are so close together. And of course, active transportation helps people interact more directly than just driving by in a car.
Local commuters and officials hope the trail offers a more affordable and safer way to travel. Thanks to donations and government funding, the Pathway Committee is close to covering the $4.2 million price tag. They expect the trail to be finished by this fall. Rosanna Hempel, CBC News, Morden Winkler.
And that is your CBC News from Winnipeg. For news anytime, you can head to cbc.ca/Manitoba, or you can use the CBC News app.
All right, thanks very much, Matt.
Back soon.
Matt Humphrey is live in our news center this morning. I'm Marcy Marcusa. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC. It is Friday. We're heading into the last weekend of March. And I don't know about this in like a lion, out like a lamb thing, because this snowstorm is not looking like a lamb. Abby is here now with our regional forecast. And then Chloe's going to tell us about highway closures and also a school division that's called it already. So, Abby, let's start with what we're expecting today across Manitoba.
We are looking at 15 to 25 centimeters of snow expected once the system goes through. We're talking about snow that should be easing sometime this morning. Then your travel will be difficult because we'll be seeing some slippery road conditions and reduced visibility once that wind picks up. Conditions in Winnipeg and the Red River Valley region, we're looking at temperatures around -4 at this time. With snow continuing throughout the day. It should ease sometime in the afternoon. We warm up to around 1 and then some breezy conditions. Tonight will stay cloudy. A bit of light snow would come, but then the good news is tomorrow we get to see a mix of sun and clouds. Similar conditions we're seeing in the Pembina Valley region. -2 at this time. Light snow for the Morden Winkler Outer all the way down to the U.S. border. We should be seeing some freezing rain in that part of the province this morning. You will get about 2 to 4 centimeters of snow accumulating once the system passes through that region. Heading west, we're looking at -7 in Brandon at this time. Light snow and drifting snow. It's blowing actually in that part of the province. Expect 2 to 4 centimeters of snow in that part of the province. The high will be around -4. In the Parkland region, we're seeing temperatures around -4, -9, -10 in Dauphin at this time with snow, and that snowfall warning is also in effect for that part of the province. Summing everything up, we should be seeing about 25 centimeters today, and then it would ease this morning. A high will be around -7. In the Interlake region, Gimli's seeing some patchy snows, temperatures around -6, -7 in some areas. The snowfall you will get for that part of the province will be about 2 to 4 centimeters, high around -3. And then for the Flin-Flon and surrounding areas, we're seeing temperatures around -17 at this time. Today, you do get mainly sunny conditions in that part of the province. High will be around -7. Up north in Thompson, -28. Clear conditions you're seeing at this time. Once the sun breaks out, you get more like a sunny day. High will be around -10, though the wind chill makes it feel colder. Tonight, the temperature is going to drop into around -27. Further north in Churchill, where we have the wind chill feeling like -41 this morning. Temperatures around -30. The sun will not be warming things up. Yeah, Mercy. The sun will not be warming things up a lot this morning with temperatures around -30. It's only going to get colder. The wind chill feels like -40 in Churchill at this time. But Winnipeg at this time, -4. We still get to see some snow continue throughout the day.
All right. Thanks, Abby. Let's get into what is happening now in with the commute, but also with school closures and highway closures, because there's already been a lot developing despite the fact that it's not even 7 a.m. Chloe Friesen is filling in for Corey Funk and has those details next.
Yeah, good morning. For folks, students and staff in the Lord Selkirk School Division, you're starting your spring break early. So that's a pro. You might not be able to leave your homes without getting a boot full of snow, but early spring break, yes. Can folks hear me? Yeah, there we go. Okay. So due to weather and road conditions, all schools are closed in the Lord Selkirk School Division. No buses are running. Staff are not expected to report to their place of work. Moving on to highway closures. Around Dauphin, north of Riding Mountain National Park, a lot of these highways are closed. So Highway 5, McCreary to Grandview, Highway 10 from the south gates of Riding Mountain National Park up to Highway 19, Highway 20 from Dauphin to the north junction of Highway 269, Highway 68 from Highway 5 to the Narrows, Highway 50 from Highway Silver Ridge to McCreary, and Highway 278 from Highway 50 to Highway 68. And Highway 276 from St. Rose du Lac to Highway 481, along with Highway 362. So early, but still, there's a lot happening on those highways after that big dump of snow. Here in Winnipeg, northbound Century approaching Silver, there is a collision with emergency crews on scene, blocking your northbound curb and middle lane. So keep left to pass. And of course, if you have any updates, if you want to let us know about the conditions you're seeing on your commute, give us a call at 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks, Chloe. It's kind of morning where things change very quickly. So check your school before you're leaving, check your division. We suggest, obviously, and then also check 511 for highways as they change. Lots of wind out there. All right, let's get into business news. Crystal Ramlakan joins us next on CBC. She's here with our business report. She joins us daily at this time. Good morning to you.
Hey, good morning, Marcy.
So let's talk tariffs. U.S. President Donald Trump threatening larger tariffs if Canada and the European Union work together. What else can you tell us about this?
Yeah, so Trump says larger tariffs could be coming if Canada and the EU work together to, quote, do economic harm to the USA. And of course, some would argue that the US is hurting other economies in the first place with these tariffs. So the latest levies from Trump include a 25% tariff on imported vehicles. They are supposed to come into effect next week, expanding a global trade war. And the EU says the move is bad for business, worse for consumers. As we talked about yesterday, some industry leaders say the tariffs could add thousands of dollars to the prices of cars. And Mark Carney has said the tariffs are a direct attack on Canadian workers. He has called the U.S. an unreliable partner, which is pretty strong language for two countries, who used to obviously be very close in trade. And in his role as Prime Minister, he has vowed Canada will retaliate if Trump moves ahead with these auto tariffs. And hundreds of thousands of Canadian jobs are connected to the auto sector, which is the largest manufacturing industry in the country and the second largest source of exports to the U.S. after oil.
Let's stay on the topic of the auto sector. There's a new report actually about electric vehicles and new builds. What is it telling us?
Yeah, that's right. So a new report from Clean Energy Canada says new multi-unit buildings should be required to make their parking lots electric vehicle ready as a possible way to spur EV uptake. So as Canada sets out on major home building plans, the Clean Energy think tank says the federal government and most provinces have no regulations to ensure those apartments are EV ready. And it says apartment dwelling is more prevalent among younger Canadians who are generally more inclined to go electric. But it says those with the most appetite for EVs are those most likely to face the barrier of not having charging access at home. So about 38% of EV owners living in multi-unit apartments do not have access to home charging. And among single-family homeowners, that number drops to just 2%. So you can see the difference in those numbers. And to help address that barrier, the report suggests adding EV charging requirements to provincial and federal building codes.
I know in Manitoba, some of the changes and upgrades are, people have been asking for many years. The province, both governments who've held office have sort of been chipping away at it. So let's switch gears. See what I did there? How's figure skating trying to engage athletes and fans right now?
Yes, they're trying to do this by embracing technology. So the International Skating Union has put in motion its Vision 2030 plan, which is designed to grow and expand the sport. So at this week's World Championships in Boston, there are some things never seen before, including cutting-edge LED dasher boards surrounding the rink, grand entrances for the athletes, and more energetic music inside the arena. So basically, the ISU is trying to make figure skating feel cool. And, some people, of course, follow the sport year-round, but many only tune in every 4 years during the Winter Olympics. And the ISU says it wants to shine a brighter, stronger spotlight on these skaters all the time. So that's why the LED dasher boards are showcasing each athlete's social media tag and why each is being introduced individually for the first time, something that track and field and, of course, other Olympic sports have embraced over the years. And the ISU wants to create a spectacle for fans in the arenas, along with the millions watching around the world. So in the future, the Vision 2030 plan hopes to improve TV presentation, simplify the sport's complex rules, increase sponsorship, and expand revenue streams. And Marcy, back at their hotels, there is also a new calming room with therapy dogs for the competitors.
Interesting. Every sport now is just trying to, either simplify or change things or broadcast differently or, really competing for those eyes on the sport. What's going on in the markets today? What are we seeing?
In Europe, stocks are falling as an escalating trade war weighs on markets. Germany is down, the UK is down, France is down. In Asia, markets are also falling. So Japan is down, Shanghai is down, Hong Kong is down. Oil is down 10 cents to $69.82 US per barrel. Gold is up $15.40 to $3,072 US per ounce. And the dollar is down almost a tenth of a cent to 69.8 cents US.
Have an awesome weekend. Thank you very much.
You too. Thanks, Marcy.
That is Christly Ramlakan. She's a regular part of our show and our team. She's here every morning with business news. Well, 6:45 a.m. is the time right now, and our temperature in Winnipeg is -4 with ice pellets as we expect 2 to 4 more centimeters of snow to fall today. Check 511 before you go out in Manitoba this morning and make sure your highways are in good condition. Up around Riding Mountain, we actually have a number of closed sections because of the snow. Well, in a moment, we're going to talk more about analyzing the latest of what has been said on the campaign trail. But first, let's hear from some Canadians, because one of the big questions in every election is who individually will be the best leader. The 2025 federal election will be held April 28th. That's a month from now. And as Canadians mull over their representatives, what do you want to see in their character continues to come up again and again. So what are the qualities that you have that come to mind when you're thinking about what you want in a leader? CBC's Karsten Knox hit the road and asked people on the streets of Halifax about that.
Integrity is the first one that comes to mind.
Integrity?
I think you should see the honesty and integrity in him.
When you're looking at political leadership in official office, show me some evidence of integrity.
And I would like him or her to be transparent in their decision-making process. You can't go wrong with transparency. In fact, if you are and you're about to make a mistake, there'll be plenty of us to raise an alarm and say, look, this is the wrong direction. So I think transparency is key in a democracy.
A leader that is impartial, a leader that also is willing to stand for the truth even if it's unconventional. Because sometimes some of our leaders or most of our leaders are very partisan. Even if the party is not correct, they would still stand by it.
Somebody who likes people. Find out what the people want.
And have you seen that before in politics?
Sorry, no. They don't listen. It's all about them.
I like leaders that are right now looking to actually have accountability in government systems, because I think our systems have kind of run away in terms of who is allowed to do what, and with very little repercussion realistically. I don't really have much faith in most leaders nowadays. I don't think most young people do.
I'm glad I'm not a politician, because I don't know how I would, there's so many needs to meet. And so how do you do it? Like, how do you decide how you're going to allocate this and that? I couldn't do it, but I guess we need someone really, really good at math and really smart.
I'm from the States originally. I've been in Canada about 7.5 years, I guess. Well, if you're looking what not to do, don't do what they're doing back home. But quality for leadership is somebody who listens to what the voters are asking for and thinks about first the most vulnerable people in a community and caters things to them first, as opposed to the people who need the least amount of protection.
So those were some voters sharing what they think about when they think about what they want in a leader. They were on the streets of Halifax speaking to CBC's Karsten Knox. Now, we have a lot of election coverage planned for you from a Manitoba perspective. So just want to mention that we have our partisan panel on Tuesday morning. So we'll hear from them again on Tuesday morning here on the show. In addition, we're going to be out on location. I think we're planning five different live on location remotes. I like to call these our community studios. So I can confirm now that next Thursday, the first riding we're going to be in is going to be the newly named riding of Winnipeg West. So this is you folks out in Charleswood and Tuxedo, Headingley, Charleswood, Assiniboia rather, and Headingley, that whole region. It's been renamed Winnipeg West. So that is where we're going to be broadcasting live from. We're yet to determine our location. We'll get that up on Facebook and we'll make the announcements next week. And as with all of these on location shows that we do leading up to the election, what we attempt to do is, what we do is invite each and every candidate in the riding where we're going to be on the program with us. And we invite you to be there as well, whether you want to come and have coffee and just listen live, whether you want to be in the room because you want to pose questions, or whether you want to get in touch with us earlier if we mention your neighborhood or your riding and you want to be involved. So next week we begin in Winnipeg West, and you know where to reach me. It's marcy.marcusa@cbc.ca if you want to let us know what issues are of concern for you or what you're thinking about as you prepare to vote, if that is the area where you live. It's 9 minutes to 7 o'clock on 89.3 FM, on 990 AM, on the app and on YouTube. And in Winnipeg, just a reminder here that we do have some issues with what's happening with the snow. So the biggest one, I think, is going to be the school division that is closed, and we'll extend that list if we need to. But Lord Selkirk School Division, all schools are closed. Oh, I just updated and it is extended. Lord Selkirk's closed. St. River is closed. Parent-teacher interviews will be rescheduled. Staff don't report to the workplace. And there's a few more on here. Franco-Manitoban, Rolling River, Lakeshore. So Chloe's going to walk us through the specifics of that right after our next interview. Let's continue talking about things on the campaign trail. The threat of President Trump's tariff on imports of autos is dominating the election right now. Trump is saying 25% tariffs will come into effect April 2nd. That is next Wednesday. Since he made the announcement, federal party leaders have been readjusting and responding to the economic hit. So Liberal leader Mark Carney even paused his election campaigning to return to Ottawa, as you might have heard, for an emergency cabinet meeting. To talk about how it's playing out, Marco Vellotti is with us, editor-in-chief of iPolitics. Good morning to you.
Hey, good morning.
So what do you make of Carney returning to Ottawa to deal with this threat? How are they planning on responding?
Yeah, it's certainly been really interesting. Mark Carney has been, this has certainly been the focal point of his campaign so far about, being strongly pushing back against the Americans, making sure that these tariff threats don't go unchecked. That being said, the response yesterday was really interesting. He talked about how Canada was going to respond, how retaliation was in the works, but he didn't kind of disclose what that would look like. And he said the reason why was, we're in a negotiation. It doesn't make sense to show your hand too early. So we had some tough talk from the Prime Minister, some promises that something will happen if the Americans go through with those auto tariffs, but we don't know exactly what that will look like, at least right now.
What's your sense of how much of an advantage there is for Mark Carney potentially to step into the role as Canada's Prime Minister while a campaign is unfolding? Like what's your sense of how this is going to play out for him?
Yeah, it's hugely impactful, right? Every time Donald Trump makes an announcement, the response, the focus turns to, well, what's Canada going to do? And by that means, what's the Prime Minister going to do? So even though we're in the campaign mode, even though the caretaker convention takes into effect, meaning, there shouldn't be big partisan announcements, there is an exemption for, issues of national or, emergencies or urgent pressing national crises. And I think, massive tariffs for a trade-dependent country like Canada would certainly qualify. So Mark Carney dominates the campaign every time Donald Trump makes a threat because all the attention turns to well, what's Canada going to do and what's the Prime Minister going to do? So it's been a huge advantage for him to have on the campaign trail.
We did learn yesterday President Trump reached out to Carney for this phone call. What do we know about it, if anything?
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting dynamic. We don't know too much. We don't know when this will happen. But remember, Mark Carney has said, we're not going to renegotiate the trade deal until, Trump stops with the annexation threats, stops with the, quote unquote, disrespect of Canada. So it's certainly interesting to see what the tenor and tone of that conversation is when the two leaders do talk. We know Donald Trump loved picking a fight with Mark Carney's predecessor, Justin Trudeau. Will that kind of carry over? Will we see, more tension between the two? I don't know. Maybe maybe to Doug Ford's point, Mark Carney will get along better with Donald Trump. I'm certainly looking forward to hear what happens when the two leaders finally do speak.
Yeah, I think a lot of Canadians are leaning into that. I want to talk about NDP leader Jagmeet Singh because he changed his campaign schedule as well. He was in Windsor yesterday. Walk us through what the opposition leaders then, him obviously and Polly Ever saying about the auto tariffs.
Yeah, certainly an interesting kind of move or kind of response from the opposition leaders. They, especially the Conservatives, wanted to make this this campaign a referendum on the past 10 years of Liberal rule. And we're seeing, that totally go out the door. And you see Jagmeet Singh, for example, having to pivot, going to Windsor on short notice to talk about auto tariffs. And for the most part, the opposition leaders have been very in sync with what the Liberal government is proposing in terms of tough talk against Trump, need to respond forcefully, and need to seek different markets for Canadian goods. I'll give Jagmeet Singh credit. He made an announcement or a bit of a novel announcement proposing that Canada remove the sales tax on Canadian-made autos as a way to bolster the industry and keep costs down. But again, they're struggling to gain some traction, some oxygen in a campaign that's been so dominated by what's happening stateside. And as a result, that's given a big platform for the Prime Minister and the Liberal leader, Mark Carney.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Marco, we'll have to leave it there for this morning. We've got storm details and schools closing while we're talking. So I appreciate your time. Always nice to have you on the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That's Marco Vellotti. He is the editor-in-chief of iPolitics. We did reach him in Ottawa. Now, it is 5 minutes to 7 o'clock. Matt Humphrey will be in with headlines in a couple of minutes. But we want to take a second here to turn to Chloe Friesen. Chloe is actually handling the school closures today, and the list has grown. And so I'll just give you lots of time, Chloe, to read out exactly what the divisions have told us about travel and about closures.
All right. Starting with Lord Selkirk School Division, all schools are closed. No buses are running. Staff are not expected to report to their place of work. The St. River School Division, all schools will be closed today due to road conditions. Staff do not report to the workplace. However, it is considered a workday for teachers and divisional office staff. Parent-teacher interviews will be rescheduled in the St. River School Division. The Franco-Manitobain School Division has one school closure, École Jour de Plaine in Laurier. There will not be bus service for École Saint-Lazare and École Saint-Georges, but these schools will be open for classes. Rolling River School Division, buses are cancelled and colony schools are closed for Friday, that's today, but all community schools are open in the Rolling River School Division. And then lastly, Lakeshore School Division, all schools are closed today.
All right. Thanks, Chloe. While you're on here, do you want to slide into highway closures or do you need a minute while Matt does headlines?
No, let's do it. Highway closures. As of 5 a.m., Highway 5, McCreary to Grandview is closed. Highway 10 from the south gates of Riding Mountain National Park to Highway 19. Highway 20 from Dauphin to the north junction of Highway 269. Highway 68 from Highway 5 to the Narrows. Highway 50 from Highway Silver Ridge to McCreary. Highway 278 from Highway 50 to Highway 68. Highway 276 from St. Rose du Lac to Highway 481 and Highway 362. Do check Manitoba 511 before you head out on any highways here in Manitoba.
All right. Thanks very much, Chloe. And now Matt Humphrey is with us to talk more about the news headlines and what's developing. Good morning.
Good morning. This fall, Morden and Winkler should have a new trail connecting the two cities. A 10-click biking and walking path will stretch along the southern Manitoba Highway across the RM of Stanley. Local officials hope it'll be safer and more affordable. A better way to travel. The price tag for the project is just over $4 million, and that's largely covered by donations and government funding. Again, that's expected to open this fall. More news after World Report.
All right. Thanks very much, Matt.
Back soon.
Well, you're going to need a fat tire bike if you're heading out today because there's quite a bit of snow down. Of course, in the rural areas, much more. Just around our building in downtown Winnipeg, there's probably 7 to 10 centimeters, according to our weather specialist, Riley Lachuk. And he's going to join us to talk more about what's expected for today as this system moves through. Remember, there were 2 bands, 2 different systems. Yesterday, it got upgraded and shifted, so lots of change here. But overall, we're expecting about 2 to 4 more centimeters of snow in Winnipeg, a high of -1, and winds are going to be gusting up to 60. So Riley Lachuk in the next hour of the program. Also in the next hour of Information Radio, on our medical column, something quirky. Dr. Raj Bhardwaj is a self-described space nerd. He apparently does medical talks about how space affects the body. So he can't resist doing that for our column today upon the return of 2 astronauts who were up in space and just returned last week. They were up for 9 months. So our medical column, Dr. Bhardwaj, coming up with that. In addition, it's an outdoor mailbox, but it's full of many little works of art. We're going to visit a free little art gallery in Winnipeg's East Kildona neighborhood in the next hour of the show. And then to serious matters, in the wake of learning that Ashlee Shingoose is Buffalo woman and the victim of a serial killer, we will speak with an MMIW GS2+ advocate about what's needed to help keep First Nations women in particular, Indigenous women, safe when they come to the city. So many have been lost on the streets of Winnipeg in short order. So are more wraparound resources some way to help? We're going to talk to an advocate in the next hour. Stay with us. It's 1 minute now to 7 o'clock.
Today on The Current.
And there was one night when I heard a... It's like, oh, what's that?
The author Claire Cameron first heard about a deadly bear attack in Algonquin Park while working there at a summer camp. The story wouldn't let her go. Claire Cameron on looking at her own fears of dying and what it means to survive, coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm John Northcott. The strategy for Canada's party leaders today has to work on 2 fronts. An election campaign all about speaking directly to Canadians. But the ongoing trade war with the United States, it's all about sending a message to U.S. President Donald Trump. Let's go to Janice McGregor in our Parliamentary Bureau. Janice, the Liberal leader, once again walking that tightrope between candidate and Prime Minister.
Yeah, absolutely, John. Mark Carney back in governing mode today, benching the partisan retail politics of the campaign to focus his key players on Canada's retaliation strategy and calculating exactly what they're retaliating against, because it now appears more nuanced and complicated, also perhaps less damaging for Canada, with more exceptions and possibly lower rates than Trump's earlier rhetoric on the automotive industry had suggested. We may not see or hear from the Liberal leader until mid-afternoon, but we know 3 things are afoot. Another First Minister's meeting with the premiers, following up on some of what they set in motion a week ago when they met in Ottawa. Carney's also meeting with his advisory council of business leaders, trade experts, retired politicians. And we're watching to see if today's the day he speaks with Donald Trump for the first time. Carney disclosed yesterday they'd finally received some outreach from the White House about setting up a call over this latest tariff order. That call is now expected this morning. About 1,000 people attended a packed political rally in Montreal last night to hear from Carney.
We will need to dramatically reduce our reliance on the United States. We will need to build new trading relationships elsewhere.
Carney said yesterday it would be poor strategy to talk in advance about what specific actions his cabinet ministers are considering. We'll see if more details emerge by this afternoon.
Of course, Janice, there is an election underway and the winner will be Prime Minister. So what are the other contenders saying?
Pierre Poilievre is focused today on trying to flip NDP seats on Vancouver Island over into the blue column. But much as he would like this battle to be unfolding on his terms, Trump's attacks on the forestry industry, for example, mean that this trade war is top of mind in that part of the country, too. His stump speech in Surrey last night did at one point try to connect these dots by attacking Mark Carney's climate policy.
The one thing that Carney and Trump agree on is that they both want to tax Canadian industry. Trump wants to hit us with tariffs, Carney with a carbon tax.
Jagmeet Singh is meeting with reporters in Toronto this morning, but his campaign may need to scramble a credible defense of these BC seats before it's too late.
Janice McGregor in Ottawa. Thanks, Janice.
You're welcome.
People in the literary world are worried books could get swept up in the trade dispute, and Canadian publishers and authors could take the brunt of it. Nicole Williams has that story.
Well, not a problem. Thank you so much.
JJ Davis says it's taken a lot of work to keep the doors of an independent bookstore open. But now, after 30 years in business, it could be the unfolding trade war with the U.S. that marks their final chapter.
This could shut off the lights, and not just ours, but indies everywhere.
If U.S. President Donald Trump moves ahead with tariffs on April 2nd, Canada has promised 25% counter tariffs on American products, meaning books even by Canadian authors could become collateral damage. Laura Carter is with the Canadian Independent Booksellers Association, also known as CIBA.
And a huge percentage of their books are printed in the United States and warehoused there.
That means books would get slapped with tariffs and ultimately drive up the cost for readers like Rowan Wosu.
To have that thought of like the cost changing, it scares me a little bit.
And it's not just small bookstores. CIBA has co-authored a letter to the Prime Minister with Heather Reisman, CEO of Indigo, one of the biggest book retailers in the country, asking for printed literature to be exempt, saying the proposed tariffs would have devastating consequences for Canadian readers, our businesses, and our cultural landscape.
I want books to be okay. I want Canadian culture to be okay.
Davis says ultimately she still supports Canada in its fight against tariffs, but there's too much at stake for books of all things to get caught up in a trade war. Nicole Williams, CBC News, Arn Prior, Ontario.
In British Columbia, the federal Conservatives have blocked a former BC cabinet minister from running as their candidate. So Mike DeYoung is running as an independent in the riding of Abbotsford South Langley. That seat usually held by a Conservative, but as Mira Baines reports, the riding could be in play this time around.
10-0.
Veteran former BC Minister Mike DeYoung has never lost an election, but this 11th campaign as an independent will be challenging. DeYoung says he was told that he was unqualified for the federal Conservative nomination, but now will go out on his own.
You're told with really no explanation, rejected. So there's disappointment.
CBC News reached out to the Conservative Party on Thursday, but did not immediately hear back. Sukhmin Gill got the nod for the Conservative nomination. He's a 25-year-old blueberry farmer. In a statement posted online, he says he's dedicated to issues important to local residents and has a strong connection to the community. DeYoung says he has people power.
I have been persuaded based on this extraordinary outpouring of support.
Political scientist Hamish Telford with the University of the Fraser Valley says the party has a strong base in the riding.
On the other hand, the Conservatives are fielding a very young, novice, unknown candidate. That sets up a potential real contest for Mike DeYoung to prevail.
Some people in the riding are questioning the party's decision.
All we heard was he was rejected. Why?
If everybody starts splitting, then what's going to happen is the Liberals are going to get back in.
So far, the federal Liberals have not officially registered a candidate for the riding. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
Bangkok is in a state of emergency. A magnitude 7.7 earthquake rattled parts of Thailand and Myanmar. At least 3 people died in Bangkok when a high-rise building, which was under construction, collapsed. At least 80 people are trapped in the rubble. And in Myanmar, 3 people died in a partially collapsed mosque. Patrick Falk has more from Singapore.
There was panic in Bangkok on Friday following the huge quake. People poured onto the streets fearing aftershocks. Resident Sarinya Nakauta recounted the moment the trembler struck while she was in her home. Stones were hitting us and I told my kids we can't stay here, she says. Reports say several medical workers were trapped under a construction site for a skyscraper near Bangkok's popular Chatuchak market. The epicenter of the quake was close to the city of Mandalay in neighboring Myanmar. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, it measured 7.7 in magnitude. Videos posted on social media from inside the country showed damage to the former royal palace and buildings. There was damage also in Yangon as well as the capital, Naypyidaw. The extent of the casualties remain unclear, but reports described a major hospital in the country as a mass casualty area. Patrick Falk for CBC News, Singapore.
U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and his wife could get a frosty reception today in Greenland. They're part of a delegation visiting a U.S. military base there. Donald Trump has repeatedly suggested annexing the semi-autonomous Danish territory, and that has prompted a growing number of Danes to boycott U.S. products. Briar Stewart has the story.
I began to feel a need to do something because...
In the days following Donald Trump's inauguration, Bo Albertus, a high school principal in Denmark, tried to cut American products out of his life. He canceled Netflix and 4 other streaming services. He stopped buying California wine and his favorite, American barbecue sauce. A small, simple way, he says, to protest the messages coming from Trump.
When he went out and said things about Greenland, that he wanted that to be American, that was just too much for me.
He helped start a Facebook group that has now swelled to 90,000 members, mostly Danes who swap advice about how to shop local and avoid products from the USA. Similar groups have popped up across Europe.
I don't think it'll make a big difference for actual sales, but it's a way for people also to talk about these things.
Ole Veva is a professor at the University of Copenhagen and says the boycott campaign is tapping into the current mood in Denmark, where Trump's determination to take over Greenland has shaken the population.
Threats from the US, from what everyone assumed was our most important allies. Are we talking a real military takeover of some kind? I mean, there's no way of ruling out anything anymore.
Veva says in recent days, Danish politicians have started to take a stronger stand against the Trump administration. The Danish Prime Minister called the trip to Greenland unacceptable pressure, while others have been calling for Denmark to stop buying U.S. weapons. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. If you're looking for tools to talk about the day's big stories with the little people in your life, check out cbckidsnews.ca, cbckidsnews.ca. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. We're live in Winnipeg at our CBC studios on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube this morning. It won't be the calm after the storm because there's a second band of snow rolling through Manitoba. It's going to bring a bit more snow today, and we'll find out about the snowfall amounts so far in a moment. Also, we're going to hear about some school divisions that are affected by this. Some are closed, some are just buses affected. There's some 8 on the list so far, and we also have some highway closures up through Riding Mountain. So welcome to Friday as we head into this last weekend of March. Now, in addition to getting you into your Friday morning, we're going to be talking on our medical column about the effects on your body if you go to space. Who knew that Dr. Raj Bhardwaj was a space nerd, as he describes himself? So we're going to hear more about that. Those 2 astronauts returning last week after 9 months. Plus, we will hear more about how the community continues to react to Ashlee Shingoose being identified as Buffalo Woman. So this hour, a feature interview with an MMIW G2S Plus advocate about the supports that are still needed to help protect women on the streets of the city of Winnipeg, and especially those young women and girls that come from the north and so quickly are lost or worse in Winnipeg. So this continues to happen, and what supports could be in place, any supports in place to try to prevent some of these tragedies moving forward. So stay tuned. That's going to be a conversation just before 8. Right now, let's go to Matt Humphrey, who has some headlines.
Good morning. As Marcy just touched on, last night saw a sacred fire for Ashlee Shingoose. Dozens sang and drummed and shared prayers. Previously known as Mashkode Bishake Ikwe Iban, she was the first victim of a Winnipeg serial killer. Her true identity was confirmed earlier this week. Her father spoke at the vigil last night, as did the premier. We'll hear more at the bottom of the hour. And a Winnipeg reporter is being ordered to give police the full, unedited interview he did with the father of a man accused in connection with a mass shooting. The journalist had tried to bar police access to it, but a Manitoba judge has decided the raw tape is relevant to the ongoing investigation. His lawyer argues the reporter's refusal to hand over the tape would be covered by laws protecting journalistic sources. We'll hear more at 7:30.
Abby has our weather forecast.
Yeah, we have that snowfall warning in effect for parts of southern Manitoba. We're looking at additional 15 to 25 centimeters expected once we get this dump. It should taper off sometime this morning. We're already having freezing rain in Winnipeg, so roads will be slippery. Be careful, drive carefully. Poor visibility also in play there. For Winnipeg, the snowfall will vary across the city. We've seen about 5 to 10 centimeters in the south end of the city. Around our building here, we already saw 7 centimeters. As expected. There's going to be more in the north side of the city. Right now, Winnipeg, -4, -5. We're seeing periods of snow will continue with some light freezing rain in play also. Expect additional 2 to 4 centimeters of snow to come. We're warming up to -1.
Thanks, Abby. Now, in those areas, we're further 2 to 4 centimeters in Winnipeg. But I mean, in those areas where, as Abby's saying, the overall system's going to dump 25 centimeters and it's already started, the problem's going to be wind. I just checked winds in Brandon. They're gusting northeast to 71 km right now. So there's problems with visibility and maybe traction as well. So we have highway issues and we have school closures. Chloe Friesen's in next with both.
Let's start with highway closures with these conditions. Highway 5, McCreary to Grandview is closed. Highway 10 from the south gates of Riding Mountain National Park to Highway 19. Highway 20 from Dauphin to the north junction of Highway 269. Highway 68 from Highway 5 to the Narrows. Highway 50 from Highway Silver Ridge to McCreary. Highway 278 from Highway 50 to Highway 68. Highway 276 from St. Rose du Lac to Highway 481. And Highway 362. Do check Manitoba 511 for highway conditions before you head out on your Manitoba highways today. Due to weather and road conditions as well, we've got school closures. Lord Selkirk School Division. All schools are closed. No buses are running. Staff are not expected to report to their place of work. Seine River School Division. All schools will be closed today due to road conditions. Staff do not report to the workplace. However, it is considered a workday for teachers and divisional office staff. In the Seine River School Division as well, parent-teacher interviews will be rescheduled. The Franco-Manitoba School Division has one school closure, that is École Jour de Plaine in Laurier. There will not be bus service, however, for École Saint-Lazare and École Saint-Georges, but the schools will be open for classes. Moving on to the Rolling River School Division, buses are cancelled and colony schools are closed for today. All community schools, however, are open. Lakeshore School Division, all schools are closed today, as well as the Sunrise School Division. All schools are closed with no buses running. If you want to update us on conditions, let us know what you're seeing on our commuter line, 204-788-3093.
Last week, 2 NASA astronauts, Butch Wilmore and Sunita Williams, returned to Earth. They splashed down after the trip to the International Space Station was famously extended. They were supposed to be up there 286 days. They were up there 9 months in space. So what did that do to their bodies? Apparently, Dr. Raj Bhardwaj is a space nerd. He loves this. He gives separate talks on this issue. So that's our medical column today.
Hello.
So scientists know that long stays in space cause big changes to the human body. But why does that happen? Like, what actually changes in the human body so much?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things. The obvious difference is gravity, right? But that's not the only reason. But without gravity, all sorts of things change. Your muscles and bones degrade. Your vision changes. It can give you bad headaches. It can give you vertigo, that dizzy feeling. But the body is also changed by the stress of being in space and the radiation it's exposed to, the lack of sunlight. It's actually really fascinating, and there's so much that we have to learn about how to travel safely in space. And the cool thing is that a lot of it can be applied to life on Earth as well. And one of the neatest things, I think, is NASA has done some research where they compared the health of twin astronauts. So Mark and Scott Kelly, one of them, Mark, stayed grounded, and the other, Scott, spent almost a year in space aboard the International Space Station, and then they compared their health over the year, and then after Scott returned from space as well.
That's so interesting. So why don't we start with bones and muscles? How does living in microgravity affect a person's skeleton?
Yeah, so if you've ever had a cast on your arm, when you get the cast off and you notice that, oh man, my muscles have shrunk right down compared to the arm or the leg or whatever that wasn't in the cast. And that's because your muscles didn't have to work as much because of the cast. So the muscles atrophy. And same thing without gravity. Your muscles don't have to work as hard. There's less resistance to movement. So your muscles start to atrophy. And that's despite astronauts spending about 2 hours a day or more exercising. So, it's not just one arm or one leg when you're in space. It's every muscle, including your heart, actually shrinks and changes shape as well. So that's the muscles. Your bones also change. Your body senses that there's not a lot of weight on the bones anymore. So it actually allows a bunch of the calcium to be removed from the bones. So research shows that astronauts lose about 1% of their bone density per month in space. And on Earth, as we age, just to put that into perspective, we lose maybe 1% per year on average. And that calcium in the bones that's sort of leaching out of your bones, that has to go somewhere, right? So it goes into your bloodstream, and if you're lucky, it gets expelled by your kidneys. And if you're unlucky, you get a kidney stone. So there is actually an increased risk of kidney stones in astronauts. Another thing about gravity not pulling on your skeleton is that astronauts get taller in space. So Scott Kelly gained about 2 inches of height when he was in space, and then he returned to his normal height when he got back into the gravity of Earth. And that sounds pretty cool. I've always wanted to be a couple inches taller. I think that'd be neat. But the stretching and then compressing of the spine causes a lot of back pain. And well over half of all astronauts complain of back pain while they're in space or after they return to Earth. And some have chronic back pain for years after coming back.
Now, when we see pictures of astronauts on the space station, also their faces sometimes look different. What is that about?
Yeah, so NASA has aptly named this puffy face syndrome because NASA names things a lot. Anyway, so it's basically because of the lack of gravity, which normally pulls fluids downwards towards our feet. But in space, there's no downwards. So the fluids in your body distribute more evenly throughout your body, and that just gives people that puffy face look. And it seems like it's no big deal, but it actually is. It gives people, that stuffy kind of almost like they have allergies kind of thing, and that means they can't smell very well, and so they lose their sense of taste and stuff, which is, maybe a good thing or maybe a bad thing when you're up in space, because the taste and smell of food is one of the things that brings us a great deal of pleasure and sort of grounds us. And in space, they don't have that as much. Also, that puffy face can give you headaches. It can cause vision changes, and a lot of that again has to do with the fluid shifting and just being more evenly distributed in your body.
So tell us more about the fluid shifts and how it affects vision change.
Right. So when you go up into space, the shape of your eyeball changes, again, because of the difference in gravity. And so the International Space Station has a bunch of glasses that astronauts can sort of, try on to see if that fixes their vision. But there's another thing called spaceflight associated neuroocular syndrome that happens to some, but not all astronauts. And the idea is that you get swelling and changes around the back of your eyeball where the nerve goes from your eyeball back to your brain. And when you get swelling of the nerve, that's not something where you can just put glasses on and fix your vision. And that, it's called like I said, that spaceflight associated neuroocular syndrome. It might be due to, the changes from gravity, but also higher carbon dioxide levels, lower vitamin levels, maybe a genetic predisposition. But this is one of those things where NASA needs to sort this out. Because if we're on a longer mission like to Mars, which would take 2 or 3 years return trip, and let's say a few months into the trip, none of the astronauts can see clearly, that would be a big problem.
You mentioned this twin study NASA has looked at. Did it reveal anything that wasn't related to being in microgravity?
Yeah, so whenever people, so for example, in this example, twins are in different environments, so your genetic blueprint, of course, stays the same. But different genes will be turned on or off depending on what kind of stresses are on your body and the environment and stuff. So that's called gene expression. So Scott Kelly, the twin who spent 340 days in space, had a bunch of changes to gene expression while he was in space. Not too surprising. But what was surprising is that even after he got back, about 7% of those changes just stayed changed. They persisted compared to his twin that was on Earth the whole time. So those were mostly in genes that were related to immune responses, because it's your immune system that proofreads your DNA as it gets copied and repairs the DNA. And that makes sense, because when you're in space, you're exposed to a lot more radiation, and that can change or mutate your DNA as it divides, right, as it copies. So your immune system has to ramp up to protect from those DNA changes that's caused by the radiation exposure. So again, that might be a bigger problem on like a 2 or 3 year return trip to Mars if people's immune system or other DNA changes or gene expression changes happen a lot.
What's the longest a human's been in space?
Yeah, so there was a Russian cosmonaut who spent 437 days straight aboard the Mir space station back in 94, 95. And then there was another cosmonaut, Oleg Kononenko, who spent a total of 1,111 days in space, but that was across multiple missions.
Wow.
So, if you think about it, like even, 1,000 days, that sounds like a lot, but we're barely dipping our toes in, as a species into this, incredibly harsh environment, and learning more about how the body adapts is super helpful to our health on Earth as well.
How did you become a space nerd? That was your language, not mine, by the way, listeners.
Yeah, no, I fully admit I'm a space nerd. Yeah, before I got into med school, I worked at the Edmonton Space and Science Center, and that got me really interested in like the science of space travel. But of course, before that, I grew up a Star Trek and Star Wars nerd, and then after I became a doctor, those two things sort of merged. I started thinking about all the ways that the science fiction of my childhood really kind of glossed over the real like scientific and medical challenges of space travel. So it became kind of a hobby of mine. I've given, public talks on how the human body reacts to space, including a kind of a fun one on all the different ways that space can kill you if you're not careful.
A quote unquote fun one.
Yeah, no, I try to keep it light. but I think it's important because the more we learn about that sort of stuff, the more we can learn about the human body and sometimes how it can respond to harsh environments even on Earth. So if we want to keep going boldly, then we got to keep learning.
Thanks so much for this. Really fun to talk about this week. It really was.
Thanks, Marcy.
So that's Dr. Raj Bhardwaj. He does a weekly medical column here on Information Radio. You're with CBC on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. To say the least, we're having an eventful Friday morning in the weather across Manitoba. The snow moved in yesterday. We have a second band coming today. CBC weather specialist Riley Lachuk is going to be in at 7:40 live. Thanks, Riley, for getting up early. He's going to walk us through exactly what these systems are going to bring further moving forward. It is causing problems in traffic and with school division closures. So 8 divisions have been affected by this so far. We'll have that list right out on the air at 7:40. And highways up around Highway 5, 10 through Riding Mountain, communities like St. Rose de Lac. Highways there and through the Narrows are all affected this morning. Many of them closed. Check 511 before you head out. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is CBC's Information Radio, your morning show. And next it's time for morning sports at 7:25. Scott Regehr joins us. Hello to you.
Yeah, happy Friday, Marcy.
Happy Friday. Happy spring break next week in Manitoba.
There you go.
Snowballs instead of other things. What are you going to be watching as the Jets play Jersey tonight? At least we've got hockey weather.
Exactly. Good time to be indoors watching, a team that by night's end could be right back atop the NHL standings, Marcy. Winnipeg, after they beat the Capitals the other night, they're 1 point behind Washington in the race for the President's Trophy. So as they play New Jersey this evening, a win could propel them back on top, and that would be good to see. Obviously, the Jets have clinched a playoff spot. Their opponent tonight, the Devils, it looks like they're going to make the postseason. They're not one of these desperate outfits that has to win every game to get in. So I think we're going to have a very close game tonight. This is a talented offensive team in the New Jersey Devils. They have Nico Hischier. They have Jesper Bratt. They usually have Jack Hughes. He's hurt. So Winnipeg, the best defensive squad against a team with all kinds of offense. We'll see what happens, but as I say, the Jets could be back atop the NHL standings by night's end.
Let's talk soccer development and the stories surrounding the injured Alphonso Davies that you were mentioning yesterday on the show.
Yeah, it's interesting what's happening there. Davies, as we talked about, tore the anterior cruciate ligament in his right knee, Marcy, last weekend while playing for Canada against the States in the CONCACAF Nations League. His agent blamed Coach Jesse Marsh for that happening, saying he forced Davies to play even though he had a pre-existing injury. A war of online words ensued, with Canada Soccer denying those accusations. Well, now it seems Davies' agent, Nadal Hussein, is dialing things back a bit. His latest social media post reads, quote, "Over the past 24 hours, I spoke with Jesse Marsh on several occasions. I have a lot of respect for him as a coach. We had positive and productive discussions and laid down the groundwork to ensure we are all aligned and working together to continue to protect the best interests of the players. Moving forward, everyone involved is focused on prioritizing Fonzie's recovery." End quote. This ACL tear, it's expected to keep Davies out of action for maybe 8 months. It means he's going to miss plenty of important matches for the club that pays him millions of dollars, Bayern Munich. And it means Davies is going to miss plenty of action for his country, which pays him nothing. Repping Canada, of course, is a labor of love, especially with a home World Cup 15 months away. Good to see diplomacy prevailing then, Marcy, when it comes to the sports governing body in this country and Canada's most important player.
What else are you watching for sports-wise heading into this final weekend of March?
Yeah, can the Blue Jays bounce back after getting embarrassed by Baltimore in their opener last night? You'll need Apple TV to find out. The streaming service has exclusive rights to tonight's second game of the season. Meanwhile, the Men's World Curling Championship gets started tomorrow in Moose Jaw. Canada's team, skipped by Brad Jacobs, is a very athletic one. Third Mark Kennedy talked to TSN about his days playing junior football in Edmonton.
My first year as a backup quarterback for the Huskies, we went 0-9. I competed against Ben Hebert, was the backup quarterback for the Regina Prairie Thunder on the other side of the field. So some pretty cool curling connections there. But I think it was after that 0-9 season, I decided I was probably better off in the sport of curling as opposed to football.
I think that was probably a good call. Ben Hebert, by the way, Canada's lead at this Bonspiel, and he will help them face Japan in their opener tomorrow in also snowy Moose Jaw.
Have an awesome weekend, Scott, and we'll talk to you next week.
Sounds good. Stay warm.
Yeah, we will do that. Warmth isn't our trouble here. Wind and snow is our big problem. We'll talk about why after the news. Also, coming up in the next half hour, the Junos are Sunday. Manitoba-born singer-songwriter and the pride of Tatasqueyak Cree Nation, Sebastian Gaskin, is up for 2 awards at the 2025 Junos. We're going to hear part of a conversation we had with him when he got his nomination. And, of course, we're going to play one of his most emotional songs. So stay tuned. That's coming up right here on CBC's Information Radio, but your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. At 7:30, we're at -4 with a snowfall warning in downtown Winnipeg. Good morning. I'm Matt Humphrey. Indeed, commuters are grappling with snow this morning, and we are seeing various highway closures around the province. The CBC's Gavin Axelrod is in the field.
I'm here in the East Kildonan area near Lord Wolseley School. It's looking like there's been a dump of snow, but nothing that's too bad. Light rain started this morning around 7 a.m., but it's slowly picking up into blowing snow, which will make for potentially slippery and slushy roads to start the day. Now, the roads aren't looking too bad yet, but the snow that's already on them might make it hard to see. It looks like there's maybe about 3 centimeters of snow, and the heaviest of that snow is expected north of Winnipeg. Snowfall began last night, leading to some pretty bad conditions on the way home, and lighter snow is expected throughout the morning. And again, just a reminder to be cautious out there. That rain and snow can make for poor conditions on roads and sidewalks. Gavin Axelrod, CBC News, Winnipeg.
And you can see a full list of highway closures at Manitoba 511. CBC weather specialist Riley Laychuk will be along momentarily for the latest weather news. The memory of Ashlee Shingoose is living on through her family and community. A sacred fire was lit last night at the Mamaway Cheetah Center in her honor. There was drumming, singing, prayers, and tobacco ties in the fire in memory of Shingoose. More than 60 people gathered. Shingoose's identity was confirmed on Wednesday. She had been known as Mashkode Bishake Ikwe Iban, or Buffalo Woman, and she was the first victim of Winnipeg serial killer Jeremy Skibitsky. Denise Cook works for the Red Dress Alert Pilot Project.
I think it's like a center point for her or for the families and the loved ones in the one community to come and offer their prayer to the fire, to, have whatever gratitude that they have for the fact that she has been identified.
Premier Wabkanu also spoke last night and reiterated his vow to search the Brady Road landfill for Shingoose's remains. A Settee TV journalist has lost a court battle to keep an interview out of the hands of Winnipeg police. Morgan Majeski has to hand over his unedited interview with the father of a man charged in a 2023 mass shooting. Majeski's lawyer, Ian McKinnon, says he's disappointed by the ruling.
The concern is that this becomes a more routine part of the investigative process for police when they're investigating crimes, to also go and say, well, we've interviewed as many witnesses as we can. Let's see what the journalists dug up.
Winnipeg police say they tried to interview the man themselves, but he refused. The judge's decision says the man was not a confidential source, and there's no doubt the raw tape is relevant to the investigation. Liberal leader Mark Carney says the United States is no longer a reliable partner. He spoke after President Donald Trump threatened tariffs on all imports of cars and light trucks. Carney says Canada will need to dramatically reduce its reliance on the U.S. now.
The old relationship we had with the United States, based on deepening integration of our economies and tight security and military cooperation, is over. What exactly the United States does next is unclear. But what is clear is that we, as Canadians, have agency. We are masters in our own home. We can control our destiny.
Carney says the tariffs were in violation of existing trade agreements, and he expects to speak with Trump later today. Meanwhile, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is on the West Coast in Nanaimo. Green Party leaders Elizabeth May and Jonathan Pedneau are there as well. Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet is in Quebec, and NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is in the Greater Toronto area. And finally, people in the Morden and Winkler area will soon have a new biking and walking trail connecting the Twin Cities. The Stanley Community Pathway will cover the 10-kilometer stretch along the south side of the Southern Manitoba Highway. Craig Dell bikes the busy road to the local health center every day. He says the new trail will help him avoid heavy traffic and stay safe in bad weather. Dell hopes to see more people commuting on his ride to work.
I think it definitely will connect the two communities for newcomers that just can't afford to drive. And now they have this option, that safe option that, that they could get to and from the two cities.
Organizers say they've been planning the trail for the past 4 years, although the idea of one has been around for decades. They expect construction to get underway this spring and for it to be finished this fall. And that's your CBC News from Winnipeg.
Show on YouTube, then it's funny because there's this optical illusion going on where Matt's doing the news, but if you lean back, Matt, we can see Riley there. It's like, surprise!
As promised.
I'll let you guys, thanks, Matt. I'll give you guys a second to switch headphones and chairs because Riley Lechuk is in, our weather specialist at CBC, because obviously the weather is special today. We went from, in Winnipeg at least, seeing the grass and having what a lot of us call, fall spring, to the reality that we're not just done with winter yet here. So the last weekend of March in Winnipeg is going to be snowed over, and most of the provinces as well. So Riley, why don't you take the weather? I know you're filling in for Abby just for a couple of these because these systems are moving in. Where are we at? Because this was two systems and it was going to affect the province differently. So where are we at as of this morning?
All right. So I'll start with where things kind of sit for us at the moment. Right now, some light precipitation sort of along Highway 2 down toward 75 around to Emerson. So some lighter snow there, but some pockets here and there through the Red River Valley as expected. And even radar right now indicating a little bit of mixing. You heard Gavin talking about the possibility of some rain in parts of the city. Radar is indicating a tad bit of mixing at the moment in parts of the city. So do keep that in mind. I know the airport is reporting some light freezing rain right now. So a little bit of everything so far through the morning hours here at least. In terms of what has fallen overnight, I went and took a ruler around CBC, around the U of W here about an hour ago.
Good for you.
About 7 to 10 centimeters on the ground, at least in our neck of the woods here in this small part of the downtown. But certainly we did see some of those heavier bands of snow a little bit further to the north, into Elmwood, in the northeast corner of the city. And this was all because of the uncertainty in the track of that system. And it just slipped a little bit further south. And what happened there was it just kind of grazed the north side of the city with some of those heavier accumulations. And that's why we saw some of those snowfall warnings coming and going and here again and off again when, say, for example, some of the southern parts of the city only picking up a couple of centimeters of snow overnight. So that's why we still have that snowfall warning in place, just because of the potential for a little bit more accumulation through the morning commute. And looking at sort of the estimated accumulation really from Garden City, Elmwood, north to Gimli is kind of the bullseye, at least here in the Red River Valley, and that it does extend back into the parkland as expected with some heavier snow into that 20 to 30 centimeter range overnight. So not a lot yet to come, maybe a couple more centimeters here and there. Not really a steady snow either. We're looking at really periods of snow throughout the day today. As we get into the evening hours, tapering off to a few flurries, and then we'll start to get some clearing back as we get into the day on Saturday. The other part of this today is going to be the winds. I know we've seen some very gusty conditions, albeit pretty isolated windy conditions in Westmont. I know Brandon's been reporting some gusts upwards of 70 through the morning so far. Generally, right now, we're looking at sustained winds across the south at about 30, gusting to 40 or 50. So, yes, may not seem all that windy. It's a bit breezy, but just considering the amount of snow we've gotten, that's going to kick all that up and create some issues like we've seen on the highways. So
loose snow, right?
Yeah. So this is all going to play out as we get through the rest of the day. Once we get into tomorrow, then we'll start to get a bit of a cleanup rolling here.
All right. We appreciate you being in early, Riley. I know these are the busiest days for you.
You're welcome. No problem.
So really appreciate you looking at the maps and walking us through all that detail. Thank you. That's CBC weather specialist Riley Lachak. He's actually going to be back with us after 8 o'clock live as well. Chloe Friesen is covering what's going on the actual commute, closures of highways and closures of schools today. Chloe, what's the list look like?
It is long. It is long. A few schools are heading into an early spring break. So Lord Selkirk School Division, all schools are closed. No buses are running. Staff are not expected to report to their place of work. In the Seine River School Division, all schools will be closed today due to these road conditions, as we've been mentioning. Staff are not to report to the workplace. However, it is considered a workday for teachers. Parent-teacher interviews as well will be rescheduled in the Seine River School Division. In the Franco-Manitobain School Division, one school closure, that's École Jour de Plaine in Laurier. There will not be bus service, however, for École Saint-Lazare and École St. George, but the schools will be open for classes. To the Rolling River School Division, buses are canceled and colony schools are closed for today, but all community schools are open. Lakeshore School Division, all schools are closed today as well. The Sunrise School Division, all schools are closed with no buses running. Moving to the highways, the following highways remain closed. Highway 5, McCreary to Grandview. Highway 10 from the south gates of Riding Mountain National Park up to Highway 19. Highway 20 from Dauphin to the north junction of Highway 269. Highway 68 from Highway 5 to the Narrows. Highway 50 from Highway Silver Ridge to McCreary. Highway 278 from Highway 50 to Highway 68. Highway 276 from St. Rose du Lac to Highway 481, and lastly Highway 362. I heard on the commuter line as well here in the city of Winnipeg at King Edward and Notre Dame there was a collision that is blocking your northbound King Edward, one of the lanes on northbound King Edward just at Notre Dame there. So traffic is getting backed up on northbound King Edward. Do watch out for that. And if you see anything else out there on your commute or you want to update us on highway conditions, call us at 204-788-3093.
I have one thing to add to this. So honestly, last night of all things, I was watching this show and they were looking at all things Japan, and they were talking about organized snowball fight leagues that happen in Japan. So they take I've never seen this before, maybe others have, but they take the snow and they pack them like they almost look like baseballs or ice balls when they're done. So it's kind of crazy.
Oh yeah, it's like that tool that you can scoop the snow into and form it.
It's all uniform, almost like you're baking or forming some kind of cookie or something. And then they take them up and they have structures built. It's very serious. Obviously, there's leagues, there's teams, there's helmets, there's rules. But I thought to myself, we should have that here.
Yeah.
Like an organized leagues that have snowball fights. So it was just so fascinating. And maybe people aren't welcoming the snow, but I was thinking, because this is the kind of snow that actually will be pretty good if you want to get out there.
It's a good day for a snow person sculpture as well. I'm hoping to see a few of those today.
Yeah, I guess we'll see those built too. Thanks a lot, Chloe.
No problem.
All right, let's get into what else is going on. So Chloe mentioned spring break is going to kick off, so that's something we're watching. March is going to end. But March 30th, Sunday, is the date of the Juno Awards. And the 2025 Juno Awards are being hosted in Vancouver and aired on CBC. The host is Michael Bublé this year. We're watching the Manitobans who are receiving nominations, and 3 of them are first-time nominated for Junos, including Titasqueak Cree Nation Sebastian Gaskin. The Northern Manitoba songwriter is up for 2 awards over the weekend. His song Brown Man earned him the nomination for Contemporary Indigenous Artist of the Year. He's also up for Recording Engineer of the Year for his song Ghost, he and his team, that is. Here's part of my conversation with Sebastian Gaskin when he was first learning about his nominations.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's just such an honor to be included amongst such incredible artists and creators, and to be recognized by the Canadian music industry at large. It's just, just such a great honor.
What does it mean specifically to be recognized for a song such as Brown Man, which is just, when I listen to that, you can hear the emotion in your voice when you're performing that.
Yeah, well, like the song was put out to sort of spark a conversation around, how it feels to exist as a person of color, as an Indigenous person in Canada, and how that can be dangerous, at times. And it's the fact that it's getting recognized at a national level is just kind of mind blowing.
Have you heard from maybe family, friends, fans back in Titasqueak since you've been nominated for the 2 Junos?
Yeah, I think a few of our leaders are going to try and make it out to the Junos. I know my mom is definitely going to come out and support, so I'm pretty excited to see her out there in Vancouver.
What did it mean to you when you passed by that billboard? I know that you were back in community last year, I think, and then you saw it. You're Titasqueak, home of Sebastian Gaskin. What did it mean to you to see that?
Oh my goodness, I was absolutely blown away, and actually when I first went back to Split Lake, the billboard wasn't up yet. And it was this sort of big secret, and they didn't tell me so I was invited up back for a youth conference, and they didn't tell me until after my performance, and they're like, hey, maybe you want to go for a ride on the highway and see what we put up out there. And so when I went to go see it, I was just like speechless, like what do you say to that? It was just such an incredible feeling to be embraced by the community that brought you up.
Do you have a sense of what your success has had, the impact of your success and what that has meant to your community and to Titasqueak Cree Nation?
I'm going to be honest, I try not to think about that stuff because it feels like a lot of pressure sometimes. But, I hope that I can, inspire at least one kid, one youth from Split Lake to, chase their dreams or, whether that's music or, sports or even higher education, I hope that my journey can help inspire at least 1 or 2.
I'm Juno-nominated musician from Titasqueak Cree Nation here in Manitoba. The 2025 Juno Awards stream Sunday on CBC from Vancouver. They're also broadcast live on the main network. Listen to the end of this tune and the emotion in his voice. This is the song that earned Sebastian Gaskin the nomination for Contemporary Indigenous Artist of the Year. This is Brown Man.
I am a brown man, my skin ain't white. They could pull me from the wreckage and still shoot me in the light. I'm not an animal, I'm not a savage. I'm just a human being who needs to heal from the heartache and the sadness. I am a brown man. I am a brown man. Turn off the TV, I don't wanna see it. They play it on repeat, it's just like the ending of the season. The castle is burning, the people are angry, the world is coming to an end, but still I see everybody laughing. I am a brown man. skin and white. They could pull me from the wreckage and still shoot me in the light. I'm not an animal. I'm not a savage. I'm just a human being who needs to heal from the heartache and the sadness. I am a red man.
That is Juno-nominated artist Sebastian Gaskin from here in Manitoba and Tatasqueyak Cree Nation and his song, Brown Man. As we're in this poignant moment listening to the lyrics of that tune, let's move to something that is equally emotional, and unfortunately it is also related. After years of an intense police investigation and community anguish, Mushkade Bishikanikwe or Buffalo Woman has been identified. Lots of emotions this week. Ashlee Shingoose is her name. She has been missing from St. Theresa Point First Nation, a small fly-in community of people. She was last seen in downtown Winnipeg in March of 2022. We now know she was one of 4 victims of Winnipeg serial killer Jeremy Skibitsky. A sacred fire was held for her last night, as you may have heard in the news. That was held in one of our North End neighborhoods. And it was there that Ashlee Shingoose's mother, Theresa Shingoose, thanked people who attended.
It's overwhelming for me, and it was a hard journey, wondering where my daughter is, always waiting for her, hoping, but we know now what's happening. We wouldn't be the way we are today if it wasn't for the people that thought about us. And I want to thank you, every one of you. You matter. Every one of yours feels that I've known you for a long time.
So that was last night, as we mentioned, Ashlee Shingoose's mother, Theresa Shingoose, thanking those in attendance at a sacred fire that was held here in Winnipeg and Winnipeg's North End, in this city where she was last seen and where she lost her life. The names of the women: Ashlee Shingoose, Rebecca Contois, Mercedes Myron, and Morgan Harris. Now, also at the sacred fire last night was my next guest. Sandra Delarond is with us live on CBC. She is from Okimakanak and with the province's MMIW G2S Plus Implementation Committee. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here, Sandra. What was last night like? What was I can't imagine how emotional it would have been being there.
It still feels very emotional. I have to say that Ashlee's parents, Theresa and Albert, are amazing, the most humble people, that walk in this world, and the love they have for their daughter and the expression of love to the community was just amazing. But I think the community also gave that love back. And we had such a large attendance last night that it was really symbolic of how much the community cared for Mushkade Beziakwe to come out and to, show that love and solidarity with the family. It was very emotional.
How special and how emotional to hear from the parents. I know when CBC visited St. Theresa Point, that was my first time being in that flying community a couple of falls ago. And it was, we were outside Albert's home there because he was, he welcomed us there, which was incredible. And he was talking with our colleague, Aaron Broman, about what it's been like for them as parents. And when you think about the journey to get here, groups of people, volunteers, this is a small community, would come into Winnipeg and search and go back, come into Winnipeg and search and go back. Ashlee went missing in 2022, and she moved, obviously, from Winnipeg, from her home community in St. Theresa. What goes through your mind when you think about the vulnerability of women and girls and people who come into Winnipeg and unfortunately, they become lost, missing, or worse?
Yeah, I think that is, one of the biggest crises for our province, but certainly, across Canada, in that there's very little support or transition planning. And if the community, say if the broader urban community, is not aware that someone needs support, then, so we've seen oftentimes it's too late. So there has to be some kind of relationship established by, the community of origin and the urban center. I know that many women come to the city to escape, that there is no support in situations where there is violence, or that there is no place for them to be, for a home, for them to raise their children and families, and so they come to Winnipeg. And shelters have a limited time for people to be in. And we haven't gotten to the point where there is adequate second stage housing or transitional housing. Although I have to say that Fisher River Cree Nation has a second stage project that will be coming online next year. But we really worry about all the time, like every summer, that is when people are most vulnerable and where more resources are needed.
Is Fisher Rivers going to be in Winnipeg, like connected here, that resource you're talking about?
Yes. Yeah. So they have a shelter in their community of Fisher River Cree Nation, but they're also establishing a second stage housing unit for that community.
Sandra,
in Winnipeg.
Sorry to interject here. I want to ask you about the Red Dress Alert System. It's also something that's been proposed. How close is that to being implemented, and is that part of this conversation in your view?
I think it's really part of this conversation. I think that the Red Dress Alert, we're in community consultations right now, will be built on what the community needs and what the community sees are the gaps, because that's where the real answers are. And, we hope to have it, all parties agree to implement it.
How would it work?
October 4th.
By October 4th, sorry there. I didn't mean to step on you. How would it work for those that aren't familiar with it?
Well, like I said, we're still in the planning stages, so I can't give you that type of detail right now.
Well, why don't I lean back on something that you said? You said, obviously, there's very few supports for people, and that you see this as, obviously at the heart of what's going on across the country, but certainly here in Winnipeg as well. Is the second stage housing you're referring to top of the list for supports, or what other supports would you like to see strengthened in Winnipeg?
Well, I think if we look at the calls to justice, the 231 calls to justice, there's a plan in place. And, that is helping people through a guaranteed basic livable income, I think is kind of the baseline of where we start to create change. Because we know that a lot of the situations are results of poverty, which then activates the Child and Family Service Directive, which then leaves people unsheltered and vulnerable. So, starting to support people with their basic needs is where we start.
Is there anything that can happen around, you mentioned the different homeless shelters, is there anything that can be strengthened there to help keep people from being preyed upon? Because in a number of these cases, we heard about actually different shelters where there were sightings either of Jeremy Skibitsky very specifically, or, the women who lost their lives. And this has been for years. It sort of seems to come up, and there's the downtown area is sort of around Higgins and Maine. There seems to be a geographic area and also different shelters there. Is there anything you'd like to see specifically done there?
I think it would be helpful to have a female identifying shelter in that area or any area, that's kind of an alternative, right? So it's like I've heard stories of women that do go to shelters that take turns sleeping because they are vulnerable. So having a space where they are by themselves and not prone to or prey to others, is really important.
Appreciate you being with us this morning, Sandra, especially after last night being so emotional. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's Sandra Delaron. She's a chairperson for Okimakanak, the province's Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Two-Spirit People Implementation Committee. Let's go to Matt quick for headlines.
This fall, Morden Winkler should have a new trail connecting the two cities. A 10-kilometer biking and walking path will stretch through the RM of Stanley. Officials there hope it'll be a safer and more affordable way to travel. The price tag, just over $4 million, largely covered by donations and government funding. More news after World Report.
-4 in Winnipeg, about 2 to 4 more centimeters of snow coming. Riley Late check with the full look at this system after 8. Highways around Riding Mountain, there's issues, there's closures. Highway 5, for example. So check it out before you go. 511. The snow has started again here in Winnipeg as well, which could make driving a little bit tricky. So 788-3093 if you want to have an update on the commuter line. And today's high in the city, by the way, is going to be right around -1 with gusty winds. Still ahead, an American historian is in town to learn more about how his ancestors from Point Douglas in Winnipeg, the neighborhood, became founders of a city in the States.
Today on Q.
I'm Garvey Bailey in for Tom Power. When Britt Lauer was getting ready to play Helly R on the hit series Severance, she says she studied a lot of caged animals to prepare.
I am a person. You are not.
Britt will tell you more about her life on Severance and about her Canadian film Darkest Miriam.
Q. This morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app, or wherever you get your podcasts. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
The author Claire Cameron first heard about a deadly bear attack in Algonquin Park while working there at a summer camp. The story wouldn't let her go. Claire Cameron on looking at her own fears of dying and what it means to survive, coming up.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm John Northcott.
Our response to these tariffs is to fight, to protect, and to build. Vive le Canada. We will fight.
Liberal leader Mark Carney back on the campaign trail as a candidate last night in Montreal. But not for long. There's more work to be done in his role as Prime Minister. Carney is expected to speak to U.S. President Donald Trump this morning about the new U.S. tariffs now threatening Canada's auto industry. And later today, he'll be meeting with the country's premiers.
In the coming weeks, months, and years, we need to fundamentally reimagine our economy. It will take hard work.
All this as new numbers just out from Statistics Canada show the economy is already struggling to deal with the effects of this trade war. CBC senior business correspondent Peter Armstrong has more.
Economic growth in this country essentially grinded to a halt in February as Donald Trump's trade wars and tariffs and threats became so much more apparent. Statistics Canada's preliminary estimates show growth in February was unchanged, so no growth at all. That comes after expanding at a decent pace in January. Those January numbers are something of a statistical artifact now. They do matter, of course, because they tell us just how much cushion we had heading into this conflict. But they tell us what was going on before those threats became quite as real and apparent as they seem today. And the answer on the cushion question is not very much. The mining and oil and gas sectors were all up. The manufacturing sector rebounded, but retail sales were down. It's those preliminary estimates for February, though, that really paint the picture of an economy in Canada that's preparing for this trade war and starting to prepare itself. These data are going to be volatile, as we already know. There's been a surge of imports into the U.S. as businesses try to get ahead of tariffs, and that, too, is going to have an impact on the Canadian economy. Peter Armstrong, CBC News, Toronto.
On the campaign trail, Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet is expected to be around the Montreal area today. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is back in Toronto. He'll be making an announcement in Jack Layton's former Toronto Danforth riding later today. Green Party co-leaders Elizabeth May and Jonathan Pedneau are in Nanaimo, British Columbia. Also in BC, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is trying to change the narrative around his campaign. Today, he's promising to impose mandatory life sentences for drug smuggling, human trafficking, and fentanyl trafficking. The Conservatives have just seen, though, a series of tough polls, and they're getting a grave warning from Ontario Premier Doug Ford's campaign manager. Kate McKenna has the latest.
It is great to be here at Apollo.
Pierre Poilievre is on day 2 of a West Coast swing. He's traveling to Nanaimo, campaigning to turn an orange seat blue. 3 months ago, it looked like Poilievre was poised to make big gains in British Columbia. Now he's trailing in national polls, but he says it's not over till it's over.
We'll wait for Canadians to make the choice on Election Day.
But some big-name Conservatives are calling for a major pivot.
The Conservatives were on track to win a massive majority government, and if election were held today, it would be a Liberal majority government.
Doug Ford's campaign manager, Keewatinowi, has some tough love for his federal cousins.
I think the Conservatives are in a lot of trouble right now, which is one of the bigger political surprises that I've seen in the last number of decades of working in this business.
Tonight says Poilievre sounds too much like Donald Trump, and it's turning people off.
I think, less name calling and sloganeering and talking about one's big, beautiful, bring it home tax cut. It all sounds a little too Trumpy for a lot of the voters.
There are 43 ridings in BC. Right now, they're almost evenly split between Conservative, Liberals, and the NDP. It's a battleground in a campaign that's already been unpredictable. Kate McKenna, CBC News, on a ferry to Nanaimo.
And just to be clear, the Conservative leader is imposing mandatory life sentences for gun smuggling, human trafficking, and fentanyl trafficking. A powerful 7.7 magnitude earthquake has rocked parts of Myanmar and Thailand. An ambulance races through the streets of Bangkok. Thailand's defense minister says at least 3 people are dead and dozens more are missing at a construction site. Bangkok has declared a state of emergency. The quake's epicenter was in Myanmar. At least 3 people there died in a partially collapsed mosque. Damage is being reported in the cities of Yangon, Mandalay, and the capital, Naypyidaw. For the first time since Israel and Hezbollah reached a ceasefire in November, Israel has launched airstrikes on a Beirut suburb. The Israeli military says this was in retaliation for missiles that were fired from Lebanon towards northern Israel. Hezbollah denies firing any rockets. It says Israel was looking for a pretext to resume attacks on Lebanon. French President Emmanuel Macron says nothing can justify today's Israeli strikes. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and his wife could get a frosty reception today in Greenland. They're part of a delegation visiting the U.S. military base there. Donald Trump has repeatedly suggested annexing the semi-autonomous Danish territory, and that has prompted a growing number of Danes to boycott U.S. products. Briar Stewart has the story.
I began to feel a need to do something because...
In the days following Donald Trump's inauguration, Bo Albertus, a high school principal in Denmark, tried to cut American products out of his life. He canceled Netflix and 4 other streaming services. He stopped buying California wine and his favorite, American barbecue sauce. A small, simple way, he says, to protest the messages coming from Trump.
When he went out and said things about Greenland, that he wanted that to be American, that was just too much for me.
He helped start a Facebook group that has now swelled to 90,000 members, mostly Danes who swap advice about how to shop local and avoid products from the USA. Similar groups have popped up across Europe.
I don't think it'll make a big difference for actual sales, but it's a way for people also to talk about these things.
Ole Veva is a professor at the University of Copenhagen and says the boycott campaign is tapping into the current mood in Denmark, where Trump's determination to take over Greenland has shaken the population.
Threats from the US, from what everyone assumed was our most important allies. Are we talking a real military takeover of some kind? I mean, there's no way of ruling out anything anymore.
Veva says in recent days, Danish politicians have started to take a stronger stand against the Trump administration. The Danish Prime Minister called the trip to Greenland unacceptable pressure, while others have been calling for Denmark to stop buying U.S. weapons. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
King Charles is back at home after being treated briefly in hospital for side effects from his cancer treatment. But events he'd planned for today are still cancelled. Robert Hardman has authored several books on the royal family. He tells the BBC the 76-year-old king is still keeping up a very busy schedule.
Just this month, he met Zelensky. He's still meeting the Prime Minister as usual. He's had 2 Canadian Prime Ministers this month alone.
The king is expected to resume his normal schedule soon with a state visit to Italy next month. Charles was diagnosed with cancer in February of 2024. The Juno Awards this weekend are breaking new ground. For the first time, the ceremony will honor South Asian artists with their own dedicated category. The CBC's Eli Glasner has more from Vancouver.
Growing up, Juno nominee Jonita Gandhi knew she wanted to make music, but as a young girl, she just wanted to fit in.
When I was young, I was kind of just trying to assimilate into the culture here, right, in Toronto, ignoring the fact that, my mom was packing rotis for my lunch that day.
But when she began singing in Bollywood films, she connected with her culture and a growing fan base.
That dream is kind of coming true now, and I'm able to kind of attract both Indian audiences and global audiences.
Gandhi is part of a growing wave of South Asian musicians based in Canada. Vancouver's very own Karan Aujla is one of the biggest Punjabi rappers in the world and one of multiple South Asian nominees competing at this year's Junos. No surprise, there's a new category dedicated to South Asian recordings, a sign of a shift for Surrey, BC Punjabi musician Chani Nata.
So to see our own people, our own language on those stages finally, it really means a lot. Because I wish we had that growing up, and now I feel like the generations after us are going to see that.
While South Asian musicians welcome the recognition, they say more support for artists will help ensure this sound is here to stay. Eli Glasner, CBC News, Vancouver.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Well, it's going to be a good snowy weekend, Manitoba, to snuggle in, start spring break, and watch the Junos on Sunday. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio live in Winnipeg. Across Manitoba, we got walloped with snow. It's coming down again now in Winnipeg as the second system sort of continues through this today, and we'll see what happens with our highways. We've had a lot of challenges. Chloe's going to be in a moment to tell us what is closed this morning, in fact, around highways. If you want to see the list of school closures, they are now up to date on our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba. But I bet if you're not going today, you already know because you're going to extend your spring break. Let's talk about this half hour of the show. Weather specialist Riley Lachuk's going to be here to make sure you know what's coming for the rest of the day in weather. Also this half hour in the program, an interesting story about the city of St. Paul, Minnesota. Maybe you visited there. There's a connection to Canada. Some of its founders got their start in Winnipeg. We're going to hear from an American historian who is in town trying to learn more. So stay tuned. We're going to hear from him. Right now, let's hear from Matt Humphrey. He's in with headlines this Friday morning. Good morning, Matt.
Good morning. People shared stories and prayers last night at a sacred fire for Ashlee Shingoose, the first victim of a Winnipeg serial killer. Her true identity was confirmed earlier this week. She had been known as Mashkode Bishake Ikwe Iban. Last night at the vigil, one of the elders who gave her that name invited her family to continue using it, saying she could walk with it in the spirit world for as long as she needed. We'll hear her father's answer at the bottom of the hour. And a Winnipeg journalist has lost his court battle and now must hand over an interview he did to city police. The judge in the case says the tape of the interview is relevant to an ongoing police investigation. At 8:30, we'll hear why the journalist's lawyer has concerns now for press freedom. More news then.
All right, thanks very much, Matt.
Back soon. Here's Riley.
Your face is like, what? What did I just say?
I have to write the end of my thing.
We all do.
Yeah.
Ask me how many times in my career here at CBC I've said the traffic line instead of the weather line, instead of the wind line, and yeah.
You always forget the ending.
Take care. Easy in, hard to get out. It's a radio rule. All right, the time right now at 8:12 a.m. on Information Radio on our Friday morning, heading into the last weekend of March. And I've been saying all morning, usually usually it's in like a lion out like a lamb, I think, March, but not so much this year. Riley Lachuk's going to take a moment here to give us a fuller forecast and then also talk about what we're going to see on the back end of this and what conditions are like. So Abby has graciously given up his mic to our weather specialist, and Riley is now joining us live.
Yeah, so I'll start where I started last time with just a overview of where we've come in the last 12, 15 hours or so. Right now, downtown, about 7 to 10 centimeters on the ground. Still a little bit of light snow in Winnipeg. Really, throughout the Red River Valley, it's down to light snow in nature with some heavier pockets embedded, particularly if you're on, say, Highway 75, Highway 2, Highway number 3, seeing a couple of heavier pockets of snow. So maybe a couple more centimeters out of some of this, but for the most part, it's done. Into the Parkland, into the Dauphin region, which did get quite a bit of snow overnight last night. There's still, still some light snow falling. Again, though, some heavier pockets of snow embedded into some of this. So generally 2 to, I would say, 3 centimeters for the Red River Valley into the Interlake yet to come. But again, some locally higher pockets. For example, in Winnipeg alone, couple centimeters the further south you went, St. Pierre-Jolie, just south of the city, 1 centimeter of snow. Compare that to Pinawa, High Bluff, Woodlands, 10 to 15 centimeters through the night last night into the morning. So some locally higher amounts as expected, and that is even true from inside the city. Like I said, expect light snow to continue through the morning hours. A few pockets of flurries here and there through the rest of the day, but we'll see some windy conditions picking up. We've started to see that already through the night last night, through the morning today. Northeasterly winds picking up 30, gusting to 50. So this is going to create some blowing snow, especially on those open highways, thinking the perimeter highway, Highway 6, 75, 1, 2. So do expect some visibility issues through the day today. And behind this,
I was just going to ask you.
It's a bit cooler air for the weekend, not that spring-like weather. We'll take a few days to get back into that, but certainly once we get into Saturday, we'll start to get some clearing going, a bit sunnier for that cleanup into the weekend.
On behalf of all the cyclists out there that don't have fat tires and those of us that are itching to golf and
everybody who took their snow tires off.
Oh my gosh, right? And you're just going, no, why? All right, so next week we'll get above zero, I think, again for daytime highs.
In the long range, once we get to Tuesday, we'll start to see things going up again. Then we're back into regularly scheduled spring once again.
All right.
So,
Thank you. I hope that all holds true. Riley, appreciate you being on early here. Riley, of course, our weather specialist at CBC Manitoba. He'll be here through the day. He's going to have a busy day. Okay, let's turn to the highway conditions currently and get those details about what is closed to this hour with Chloe Friesen.
Yes, I have never been happier to forget to make the appointment to change my tires. So still rocking those winter tires, probably a good thing. Due to many highways remaining closed here in Manitoba. We'll start with Highway 5, McCreary to Grandview, Highway 10 from the south gates of Riding Mountain National Park to Highway 19, Highway 20 from Dauphin to the north junction of Highway 269, Highway 68 from Highway 5 to the Narrows, Highway 50 from Highway Silver Ridge to McCreary, Highway 278 from Highway 50 to Highway 68, Highway 276 from St. Rose-du-Lac to Highway 481 and Highway 362. A reminder, if you are heading out on highways here in Manitoba, check Manitoba 5114 for your full highway conditions. Here in the city of Winnipeg, we're looking at King Edward and Notre Dame. There is a collision in that intersection blocking all westbound lanes. Your northbound and southbound median lanes are also blocked there. So if you're heading westbound, use alternate routes. If you're heading northbound or southbound, keep right to pass. Again, that's King Edward and Notre Dame. As well, the Louise Bridge is set to close at 9 a.m. this morning. That'll stay closed until 3 o'clock p.m. You will have to find a different route there. That's due to repairs. As well, I got a call about Route 90 if you're heading northbound. As you're approaching Taylor, you're down to one lane, so Route 90 northbound is getting quite backed up. If you have anything else to add, if you're seeing anything else out there on the commute or you want to update us about conditions, give us a call at 204-788-3093.
Well, up first this half hour, with all the ongoing tensions between Canada and the United States right now, it's easy to forget just how intertwined our histories are. My next guest is working on a book that reminds us of some of that shared history. John Vanek is an American historian. He grew up in the Twin Cities. He's in Winnipeg, though, right now to learn more about how his distant relatives went from settling in Point Douglas, neighborhood here in Winnipeg, to becoming one of the founders of St. Paul, Minnesota, and a nearby city there that you may have heard about before. We've talked about it on the show before. It's called Little Canada. And so we have John on the Zoom with us this morning live. Hi, John.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. So this starts with one of your ancestors. Her name is Geneviève Laurence. Can you tell us a bit about her story?
Well, she was born in Quebec into a family of voyageurs, and despite how much we like to romanticize that lifestyle, it was very difficult. And so she lost a number of her male relatives, drowned or were lost in the West one way or another, which left her and her sister with their widowed mother in Montreal. And there they came to the attention of some of the fur traders and to Lord Selkirk himself, who organized a brigade of Canadian settlers in 1818. And they were the three women who came west without any male accompaniment in that brigade. And that's how she got to what is now Winnipeg. And then she spent 20 years here on Point Douglas with her mother. And then she found a man to marry, a French-Canadian named Benjamin Joffé. And they, in 1837, in one of the early ox cart trains, left the Winnipeg area and moved down to early Minnesota, which had just been opened up with some of the very first treaties with the Dakota and Ojibwe. And one of the parts of the book that I'm writing, and sort of the reason that I'm back up here doing research, is three of Genevieve's brothers stayed here in the Red River settlement and were more or less influential in the free trade movement and in sort of as founding families in the burgeoning Métis community. And so those relationships, that family relationship between St. Paul and Little Canada and then Minneapolis when it grew up and the Red River settlement and the developing, province of Manitoba lasted for decades, especially through the ox cart trail.
So you were mentioning a couple of communities there. What direct role did your ancestor play in founding the city of St. Paul and eventually settling in Little Canada in Minnesota? How did it get that name for those that haven't followed that history before?
Sure. So initially, the city of St. Paul was called Pig's Eye after a one-eyed whiskey dealer who lived there. And
really?
Yeah. And
interesting.
So,
okay.
Benjamin and Geneviève were caught up in a battle between another illegal whiskey dealer and a corrupt military official who was trying to use his military power to get himself a land claim. And so they had their house torn down by troops from Fort Snelling and were sort of kicked farther down the river. And the place that they settled ended up being the sort of de facto head of navigation for steamboats. So it became a city, and they only wanted to be farmers. But there was enough of a community there that once the first Catholic priest came up, they helped found the church. They donated land for the church and helped build the church, which they named St. Paul and then renamed the whole community St. Paul after the church. So they were one of the influential families. There were a couple other families from up here.
But they were one of them, yeah. And then
they were one of them.
And Little Canada, how did Little Canada get that name? And if people haven't been there, how far is it from St. Paul?
So in 1844, St. Paul was getting too busy. It had about, 6 houses. So Benjamin and Geneviève moved 6 miles north and just carved out their own little farm and built the first flour mill in Minnesota, the first commercial flour mill. And as more Canadian immigrants came, both former fur traders from Canada and the United States and new immigrants from Quebec, it quickly took the name Petit Canada or Little Canada.
How big is it
And
today?
now-
It still exists.
It
right?
still exists. I don't actually know the population. It's a typical inner ring suburb now, but it's still very much celebrates its Canadian history. Their annual festival in Little Canada is called Canadian Days, happens every August. Everyone would be welcome to come down. I know that it's a little bit tense with the national relationship, but Little Canada is very much still a welcoming place, and very proud of the archive they have there. It's sort of the center of French Canadian research in Minnesota.
I want to get to your visit here specifically. You've been here before. You're on a fact-finding mission again. You mentioned also, I think your relatives, brothers, I believe you were saying. But I know that there's some distant relatives in Winnipeg, but also in St. Laurent or St. Lawrence, depending. You can say it both ways, I know. But if there happens to be someone listening who thinks they can help you with the history, how can they get in touch, and what specifically are you hoping to learn?
Well, to get in touch, I have a website. You can go to gervaisbook.com, or as the Americans say, Jarvis, book.com. And you can learn more about the whole project and all the research I'm doing from Quebec to Manitoba to Minnesota. I'm interested in talking to anyone and everyone who is a part of these communities. I'm currently sitting in the basement of some distant relatives I met because of this research here in Winnipeg. And a shout out to J.L. Carrier and his partner Renee. I know they're very social, so there are probably a lot of folks listening who know them. Feel free to reach out. There is an email address at the website. And
you can make some connections. Maybe you'll be taking a road trip to St. Laurent as well. Beautiful part of the province, if you haven't been there, by the way, right by the lake. You mentioned this already, John. You're doing your research now at probably the most tense time I've ever lived through here as a Canadian. You probably maybe feel the same way in terms of the relationship between our two countries. What do you hope people might take away your book when this eventually publishes, through that lens? Has it been challenging for you to be here as an American right now? I'm just curious how you're feeling about all of that in the context.
Well, I was very prepared and had my guard up, and we've definitely had some conversations as I've met people. But I think most folks understand that on an individual level, we're all just trying to get by, continue to do your job. The historical part is the last two times that there were troops stationed here in Manitoba at the border with the threat of annexation from the United States were the 1870s and 1846. And so the 1870s was right after the real resistance and the creation of the province of Manitoba, and there had been a threat of the Métis potentially joining the United States. And then back in 1846, it was the Oregon boundary dispute. And I think about President Polk back then, who was sort of a very outspoken advocate of we're going to get everything, we're going to take everything. And in both of those cases, it never came to blows. And my hope is that it's the same again, that this is a lot of bluster, and that we can just get back to being friends. Every single person I've met here has been exceptionally kind and generous. And you are fully living up to your reputation, Canada, as the nicest people on earth.
Well, bonjour to you. I hope you find some answers to your historical search and have a pleasant and fact-finding good rest of your trip here while you're in Winnipeg and in our province. Thank you so much for being on Zoom with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I love that you found a home, a place to stay already. That's so awesome. John Vanek's been with us via Zoom, American historian. He is in Winnipeg to learn about the connection between our city and another city in Minnesota, Little Canada, and of course St. Paul and its founding, as you heard. You can check out his website or reach out if you have any information. Gervais Book, so Gervais, en français, gervaisbook.com. Well, let's look here at the time. We're at 8:26 a.m. Matt Humphrey has our next news at 8:30. By now, you know what schools are closed. You can check online for that list at cbc.ca/Manitoba. Right now, I want to talk about music, and we're going to play a tune. We've got just enough time to slide this in before Matt. The Juno Awards are Sunday, and we have been celebrating the Manitobans who are nominated. One of them is a blues legend. Big Dave McLean's up for Blues Album of the Year. His latest album is This Old Life. It's McLean's 5th nomination. And he last took home a Juno in 1992 for his album Saturday Night Blues. Will he win on Sunday? We'll see. Here's the title track of the new album.
this old life. I just can't stand to live it no more. Oh, this old life. I just can't stand to live it no more. If you help me get myself straightened all out right now. If you don't, I am going to have to go. I'm asking you, baby. Darling, just help me once more. I'm asking you, baby. Darling, please help me once more. If you help me get myself straightened all out right now.
So is Boy Golden, Jocelyn Gould, James Ennis, The Secret Beach, Sebastian Gaskin, and Jordan St. Cyr. Watch the Junos. The performances are always so much fun. We'll see if those Manitobans take home the hardware. The Junos on Sunday out of Vancouver. Michael Bublé is hosting, and it's streaming on CBC Gem. Trying to get my blues voice on. I'm not good at that. Oh, hang on one sec. I'm talking to Marjorie Dalhouse, who's joining me in studio now.
You sound very soulful, Marcy.
You think so?
Yeah.
I'm way too hyper. I'm like a news-based morning show host. What's happening now? You are here to talk about your show coming up between noon and 1, of course, and the call-in today is about what?
The weather. Yes, it's the big story today. A lot of folks talking about the weather. We want to hear what it's like in your neck of the woods. I know this weather warning, this system is sitting over a big part of Manitoba, especially southern and central Manitoba. So call in and tell us about what you're seeing out there. Maybe you have a memory about a snowstorm that you want to share with us. Give us a call after 12:30 on Radio Noon.
All right. Thanks, Marjorie.
Thanks, Marcy.
Marjorie Dalhouse is the host of Radio Noon, and check it out over your lunch hour right now. It's time for your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. At 8:30, we're at -4 with a continuing snowfall warning in downtown Winnipeg. Good morning. I'm Matt Humphrey. The parents of Ashlee Shingoose say they plan to keep her new name alive. The 30-year-old mother of 3 was given the name Mashkode Bishake Ikwe Iban, or Buffalo Woman, in 2022. Police knew she was one of the victims of a serial killer, but her true identity wasn't known until this week. Thelma Morisseau is one of the elders who was instrumental in choosing the name. At a vigil last night, she invited Shingoose's family to keep using it.
She can carry that name, Mashkude Bijikikwe, if you want her to. The way we had intended is that she would walk with that name for as long as she needed, or forever in the spirit world.
Shingoose's father, Albert, answered on behalf of him and his wife, Theresa.
We want her to carry that name. Buffalo Woman. She'll carry that name.
Premier Wab Kinew also spoke at that vigil and reiterated his vow to search the Brady Road landfill for Shingoose's remains. A City TV reporter must hand over an unedited interview he did to Winnipeg police. A Court of King's Bench judge has ruled against Morgan Majeski. He had wanted to bar police from accessing his interview with the father of a man charged in a mass shooting. Majeski's lawyer, Ian McKinnon, says the decision could make sources afraid to speak to journalists.
That's the really concerning part, the whole chilling effect that this could also have on people maybe not talking to journalists as much if they know that everything they say to a journalist could just end up going to the police.
Majeski's employer, Rogers Media, successfully fought off the order twice. The journalist paid for this latest challenge himself. Turning now to Montreal.
Our response to these tariffs is to fight, to protect, and to build. Vive le Canada. We will fight.
That's Liberal leader Mark Carney back again on the campaign trail last night as a candidate. But today he's working primarily as the Prime Minister, holding talks with members of his Canada-U.S. cabinet and meeting with premiers about Canada's economic future.
In the coming weeks, months, and years, we need to fundamentally reimagine our economy. It will take hard work.
And at some point today, Carney is expected to speak with U.S. President Donald Trump. However, it's not clear when that will be today. As for the other party leaders, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is in Nanaimo, British Columbia, as are the Green Party co-leaders Elizabeth May and Jonathan Pedneau. Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet is in the Montreal area, and NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is back now in Toronto. And staying with the economy, the latest update on the state of the economy is out this morning. It's showing the country's gross domestic product rose in January by 0.4%. Statistics Canada says the biggest factor was a surge in oil and gas and mining production. And the agency's early estimates have growth essentially unchanged in February, as the Canadian economy began bracing for those U.S. tariffs. And finally, a new biking and walking path will soon connect Morden and Winkler in southern Manitoba. The CBC's Rosanna Hempel was there last week as part of our Communities in Focus initiative. She brings us more now on how the communities work together to make this dream a reality.
About 10 kilometers of highway connects the cities of Morden and Winkler. The busy road stretches across the rural municipality of Stanley. In a few months, the Twin Cities will be connected by a new biking and walking trail. James Friesen chairs the Stanley Community Pathway Committee. He says people have been talking about linking the Twin Cities this way for decades.
The pathway to us really signified sort of a physical bond between two communities that are so close together. And of course, active transportation helps people interact more directly than just driving by in a car.
Local commuters and officials hope the trail offers a more affordable and safer way to travel. Thanks to donations and government funding, the Pathway Committee is close to covering the $4.2 million price tag. They expect the trail to be finished by this fall. Rosanna Hempel, CBC News, Morden Winkler.
And that's your CBC News from Winnipeg. For news anytime, you can head to cbc.ca/Manitoba, or you can use the CBC News app.
All right, thank you, Matt.
Thanks for the morning, Mars.
Yeah, you too. So Matt was filling in today in our news department for Heather Wells. So I want to thank everyone out there. So that is Matt Humphrey, Aaron Broman today, Darren Bernhardt, as well as Riley Leitchuk, who came in early to be on the show. Thank you, Riley. Also, just thanking everyone for the entire week. These is our current affairs unit and people who work on all of our hours of programming here. Morning, noon, afternoon, web, weekend. Our associate producers, Abby Adeyemi, Kalkademu Legeda, Sierra Sanders, Chidi Akuma, May McKillop, Marshall Hodgins, Dylan Longhurst, Issa Kickson, Chloe Friesen, and Bruce Layden. Our current affairs reporters, community reporter Shanley Vidal, reporter Jim Agapito, hosts in unit Nadia Kidwai, Faith Fundal, and Marjorie Dalhouse, guest host as well Margot Watt this week. Big thanks to also our producers, Wendy Parker and Corey Funk acting as producer this week, and Donna Carrero, who's been working on some of our election coverage. YouTube producers Kevin Nipatebo and Travis Peterson, videographer Jason Empson in our unit this week. Nellie Gonzalez overall is the show's producer of current affairs. Leif Larson is the senior producer of audio at CBC Manitoba. So that's the list. Everyone works so hard to bring you the best programming and guests and be reflective of this province, and we thank everybody for their hard work. Last look at what's going on, Abby, with our weather here.
Yeah, the snow continues throughout the day. We're looking at 15 to 25 centimeters once the system passes through. Winnipeg should be seeing additional 2 to 4 centimeters of snow, warming up to a high of -1 today.
All right. Thanks very much, Abby. All this should calm down tonight. Hopefully some melting by Tuesday next week. I'm not sure, Chloe, if you have anything you want to add. I mean, we've been doing the closures and lists of highways, but maybe a reminder here?
Yeah, highway Manitoba 511 is your place to go to see those closed highways. Keep updated and drive carefully. Give yourself extra time and a bit of extra patience for your fellow drivers out there today.
All right. Take care. Be well, everybody. We are back again on Monday morning with another edition of Information Radio. Thank you for joining us wherever you were joining this morning. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Take care. Have a great rest of your day. And woohoo, Junos! Woohoo, spring break. Have a great weekend. The Currents coming up next.